seconded by Segura, to approve the request for leave of absence for 5 certificated employees with the vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Pike, seconded by Solis, to deny the request for leave of absence for 1 certificated employee with the vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Pike, seconded by Tarantino, to approve the suspension and unsatisfactory performance settlement and release agreement with 1 certificated employee with the vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Segura, seconded by Solis, to approve the suspension, settlement, and release agreement with 1 certificated employee with the vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Pike, seconded by Segura, to approve the settlement and release agreement in the case of Huerta versus Sweetwater Union High School District with the vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Number 6. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the July 9th, 2018 regular board meeting, with the change that the board will first consider board agenda item K3 after the consent agenda. Do I have a motion? Gentlemen?
I'll move approval. Second.
I have a motion by Tarantino and a second by Segura. Would you please call for the vote?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. The board is very pleased to recognize the Quinn Murphy Foundation for their scholarship program. The foundation is started after the sudden death of Andrew Quinn Murphy from a treatable yet misdiagnosed illness. The foundation raises money to provide scholarships to athletes, scholars, students who face obstacles, and students who aspire to pursue the medical profession. The foundation has awarded 161 scholarships totaling $100,000 to San Diego County students, with 141 of those being awarded to Sweetwater District students. We are very grateful to the foundation for their support of our students, and we are honored to recognize them here tonight. Please help me welcome the father of Quinn Murphy, Mr. Brian Murphy, along with Brian's sister, Maria Gallagher.
Dr. Janney, board members, cabinet members, this is a great honor for us, recognizing the Quinn Murphy Foundation, and losing a child, it's one of the most difficult things a parent could go through, and when my son's name is being recognized, it's very therapeutic. It's really helped me, and this foundation, I have been able to find purpose by helping students going to college. We do also community service for kids by doing campus beautification projects, and we've created a strong foundation, bringing community together, and I just want to thank you very much to recognize us. My son is looking down on us, and it's something that I can be proud of, that I can, we're carrying on his legacy by doing good in our community, helping students. So thank you very much.
It's always good to see positive things come out of things that aren't so positive. And that's a wonderful time to start our meeting tonight. And now we'll have an update from our superintendent, Dr. Karen Janney.
Well, welcome everyone to our first board meeting of the 2018-19 school year. So thanks for coming. We want to welcome our new student board representative, Brenna. I met with Brenna earlier today to kind of share her long list of responsibilities as a student board rep, as we know, right? She's got some big shoes to fill, but she's ready. Brenna is a junior at Eastlake High School. She most recently has been chosen or appointed as the Commissioner of Athletics at Eastlake. And that's good because she's also a member of the water polo team and the swim team. So she's very involved. She's very busy, but she knows her responsibilities here, and she's going to do a great job. So welcome to our school board. We know she actually told me today that she heard a little bit about the student board rep, but when she found out really the impact and that she's representing everyone in the district, all the students in the district, she goes, I got to do that. So she went for it, and here she is. So welcome. So last Friday, you're going to get a second in a second. We kind of went through the agenda, and she knows she's going to speak next. Last Friday, we held our annual management academy. We call it our Leadership Academy. And there was lots of discussion and collaboration around our work for this coming year. And I actually shared the 5 leadership practices of exemplary leaders based on 40 years of research by 2 authors of the name James Kouzes and Barry Posner. So from this point on, I'm going to call them K and P because it's just long to say Kouzes and Posner. And they wrote this book called The Leadership Challenge. So leadership in our district, though, does not only apply to administrators. Every single person in the district can be a leader. So that if you lead even a small group or a large group, you're a leader. So that means if you're a leader of a school board or a district or division or department, a school, a classroom, if you are in charge of a bus full of students or a PLC or a union or a cafeteria staff or custodial staff, a team, the list goes on. So every single person in our district can be a leader and is a leader. So K and P conducted research about what leaders do when they are at their best, at their personal best. And one of the first people, I shared this story with the administrators, one of the first people that they interviewed for this book 40 years ago was a gentleman by the name of Don Bennett. And Don Bennett shared something very important with them because Don was the first amputee who climbed Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is 14,410 feet. And he climbed that on one leg and 2 crutches. And the authors asked him, how did you make it to the top? And Don answered, 1 hop at a time. 1 hop at a time. And so when you think about it, that's really how most extraordinary things happen or are accomplished. And as much as we might want to think, we just can't automatically leap to the top of a mountain. It takes 1 step or 1 hop at a time. And so sometimes, though, we find ourselves paralyzed by the mere challenge, the scale of a challenge. And it's challenging because we're asked to do more with less. We're asked to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. We're asked to innovate on the fly sometimes. We're asked to deal with extreme uncertainty. And somehow, on top of all of that, we're still asked to find time for our family and our friends. And so sometimes it's just really overwhelming. But so is looking up that mountain from the bottom. And so K&P also asked Don Bennett, why did you want to climb the mountain? And Don replied, because I want other people who are disabled to know they are capable of doing great things or more than they think they can do. And so you see, Don Bennett had a vision of others doing great things. And so finally the authors asked Don, what was the most important lesson you learned from that climb? And he thought for a moment and he said that you can't do it alone. That you can't climb a mountain all by yourself. And so the leadership challenge is about how ordinary leaders mobilize others to want to get extraordinary results and extraordinary things done. And so it's about the leadership that makes a positive difference in our workplace and creates that climate in which people turn challenging opportunities into remarkable successes. And so after thousands qualitative and quantitative analyses, K&P, Kouzes and Posner, found there are 5 practices that define exemplary leadership. And that when we engage in those 5 practices more frequently, we are more likely or more effective, and we can increase the probability of making extraordinary things happen. So I'm just going to share the practices with you, nothing about them, but just the titles, right? Here are those 5 practices. Model the way, inspire a shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. And so finally, it all comes down to what we've been talking about for the past 3 years, and that is that leadership is a relationship between leaders and those they lead. And so as we move into this new year, I just want to encourage everyone to lead on, one hop at a time. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Janney. And now we'll hear from our student board representative. And you can introduce yourself again,
Yes.
so we all get your name.
Yes. So like Dr. Janney said, my name is Brenna Pangelinin, and I just wanted to say how extremely honored I am to be able to have this opportunity to be the student representative for this district, and I am beyond excited to work with such amazing leaders that we have on this board and working in this district. And hopefully I can provide some useful insight regarding some of these issues from the student perspective. And I just really can't wait to see what this year has in store. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just, her dad came today to kind of just cheer her on, so maybe she could introduce him.
That's my father right there. His name is Joseph Pangelinin.
All right, way to go, Dad. Thanks for coming.
No.
I just have one comment, and that is, it's nice to have a third female on our board of trustees. So, yay. Do you want to say something?
No, I agree with you.
Okay, yeah.
You agree with the girl power. Outnumbered at home.
Yeah. This is a point on the agenda where members of the public, but it is our public too. I mean, we're all in this community together, may address the board on any matter not on the agenda, but have 3 minutes each to do so. The Board of Trustees cannot legally take action on or respond to matters not posted on the public agenda, but will refer the matter to the superintendent's office for review and report. And we thank you for your cooperation.
Nick Marinovich.
Good evening. The topic I have here is probably something that relates to another agenda item, but after last school board meeting, there was I really looked at the budget presentation, and what I wanted to address to you tonight is the deferred maintenance budget and the importance of maintaining our assets in the future. One's funded with Propo, whether this new bond measure goes forward and passed. Because I've been sitting at meetings of the two of them at the San Diego County Taxpayers Association, which districts are giving their, and I can't reveal the specifics, their presentations about why they need new bond money. And I'm looking for a theme in all these presentations, and one of them was, hey, a lot of these districts just didn't maintain their buildings properly over the years. They're run down now, and they need to replace them or substantially refurbish them. And so I believe, because there's no constituency that can argue for major maintenance. So I guess the bond oversight is your constituency. I just can't emphasize enough the importance as you move forward of really taking a long, hard look, or relook at the major maintenance budget. And I, you know, and just in closing, you know, I kind of like wondered how in the hell can they be running, you know, out of having such a tight budget situation with every, you know, if you believe, you know, the economy is rather strong, and I do understand the structural problems the school district has with pensions and health costs and those special education or whatever new programs that are you're responsible for. But bottom line, I'm here as an advocate for really taking a long, hard look as you move forward with this bond measure of making sure that you've got that annual discussion about the importance of major maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen Shears.
Earthquake retrofitting of old buildings is an issue I've spoken on 3 times, once before this board. In 2011, KPBS and The Voice reported several districts in our region had buildings which could present danger to our students in a major quake. Both reports stated Sweetwater had failed to report back the finding of the inspections. What triggered this comment was a review of the BB&O project language, which stated any retrofitting needed would be done. Yet I have not seen any retrofitting come before either board, with the exception of Montgomery's old gym, and that was mandated by DSA. Have the inspections on our old campuses been done? If so, was any needed structural work completed? And finally, did we report back to the state? The next topic is budget and audit. I was contacted by members of the community asking why the financials look so bad, taking into account we have an audit subcommittee. The community has long called for more in-depth audits, tiring of those that are so inconsequential that this year's audit was phoned in. So the question needs to be asked, was the mandate for financial experience of committee members, was that a help? I don't mean to dishonor the reputation of those community volunteers because they are in fact excellent. But perhaps our tax dollars would have been better served if more attention would have been paid to the subject, audits, as in-depth audits. For example, the Propo performance audit, which provided much needed constructive criticism of what could be done better, was met by one of you with hostility. The time for fluff audits should have been over when your tenure began, so the question remains, why hasn't the audit subcommittee focused on in-depth scope? We were told a forensic audit was too expensive, yet we have seen no improvement on the depth or improvement of our audits. So following Dr. Janney's advice, it is time to conquer our financial hill, one audit at a time, with in-depth audits. See, I do listen. And following up on Mr. Marinovich's comment, when he was up here speaking, I remembered Mr. Pike early on. You asked why we were not spending more money on deferred maintenance. You questioned the custodians. You wanted accountability. And I praise you for that. You are a true leader. What I want to see, though, is deferred maintenance budget. You need to stop borrowing from it. You want more money from us, more tax dollars, $500 million, but you're not taking care of what we have. So with all due respect, please, we need to do what we need to do. And Mr. Pike, continue the fight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolina Caldera.
Buenas tardes, tengan todos ustedes. Estoy representante de Chula Vista Miro como en el comité de DILAC.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the representative of DILAC community. She's the alternate representative of the DILAC community at Chula Vista Middle.
Y de DIPAC, representante de DIPAC de la misma escuela.
And also the representative of DIPAC from the same school.
Nada más quiero hacer referencia precisamente, como recordarán, sobre la inconformidad que tuve con la doctora Pérez en cuanto a la manera que fui tratada dentro de las juntas de una manera discriminatoria como representante de dichos comités.
I just want to remind that I came here before to talk about the way I was treated in one of the meetings. In her opinion, she feels that she was discriminated.
Les hice, saqué unas copias de la última junta que tuvimos en mayo 24 del 2018 del comité de DILA.
I made copies of the minutes from the meetings that we had in May 8th.
En donde de alguna manera subrayé con amarillo precisamente los puntos más importantes que se trataron sobre la proposición 8, de las cuales nos proporcionó información.
Okay, and I highlighted for you with yellow the most important items regarding Proposition 8.
Como recordarán, es una proposición propuesta por el Estado y por la votación de los ciudadanos para que de alguna manera se involucre la ciudadanía y obviamente la educación bilingüe para nuestros estudiantes.
As you well know, this proposition is also to get involved all the citizens regarding the bilingual education for students.
Hay otra copia más en donde se hace referencia de la asistencia de las personas en dicho comité.
And there is another copy where it has also all the persons that they were present at that meeting.
Quiero hacer énfasis en que dichas actuaciones de nuestra representante dentro de la Chula Vista Middle forma parte de 5 representaciones. Hay una persona que está representando a la escuela Chula Vista Middle y forma parte del comité de la mesa directiva del DILAC.
Okay, there is one person that is representing Chula Vista Middle, and she's also part of the DILAC committee.
Nada más para que se den una idea, es representante de, es secretaria del comité de DILAC.
She's the secretary of the DILAC committee.
Forma parte del miembro del concilio escolar.
And also she's part of the school site council.
Es representante de DILAC, de la misma escuela Chula Vista Middle.
And she's also representative of DILAC.
Y forma parte, es miembro de la elaboración y revisión de los estatutos del comité de DILAC.
And also she is a member of the committee that review the guidance and regulations.
La cuestión es de que el hecho de que haya padres de familia que estén representando más de 2 comités, como es en el caso de nuestra representante, la señora Antonia May, que es la secretaria del comité de DILAC, ha traído como consecuencia el haber votado dentro de las juntas de DILAC para que en el momento que yo propuse la revisión de los estatutos.
Perdón, ustedes están diciendo que porque la señora está siendo miembro de 5 comités. And because this person is member of 5 committees,
ha traído como consecuencia el evitar a toda costa, obviamente informada a la doctora Pérez de esa situación con varios padres de familia, de que se reduzca la participación de los padres.
And she spoke with Dr. Perez to reduce the participation of the parents.
La cuestión aquí es de que yo había sido una de las personas que promovió el hecho de que se hiciera la revisión de los estatutos y no fui aceptada.
I'm the person that suggested that the guidelines of the committee will be reviewed, and it wasn't accepted.
Argumentando la doctora Pérez de que nada más habían 2 personas autorizadas para ello. Esto ha traído como consecuencia de que los alternantes no tuviéramos derecho a dar ninguna recomendación y participación en los comités.
There were 2 other persons, and according to Dr. Perez, these 2 persons, they were the only ones that can vote, and not the alternates, like in her case. They didn't take into consideration their opinion.
Aquí está redactado precisamente la mención que hace Aurora Clark en cuanto a que no se me dio el derecho a hacer cuestionamientos en la Junta, solamente derecho a una pregunta. Les hago llegar la copia.
And also I'm going to give you a copy where it's stated that they did not allow me to speak and I was allowed only to ask just one question.
En dichas minutas, solicité que se quedara sentado en actas. En estas minutas, precisamente sobre la problemática del nombramiento de cinco representaciones de un solo padre de familia.
Okay, in those minutes, I specifically requested that it will be stated that this is just one person representing 5 committees.
La cuestión es de que invité a los padres de familia que este próximo año escolar, por favor, tuvieran cuidado a no permitir de que los padres de familia tuvieran más de 2 nombramientos.
So I suggested all the parents that this school year, no one will be allowed to participate in more than 2 committees.
Agradecí a los padres y la cuestión que sucedió de toda esa redacción que hice y que quedó asentado en grabaciones.
And what the results after all what I stated, and it was also recorded.
Redactaron lo siguiente.
And this is what they stated. Esto es lo que pusieron en
Sí, la señora Carolina Caldera de Chula Vista Middle hizo un comentario público sobre representaciones de los comités, lo cual está fuera de todo contexto.
Okay, so they just took out of context whatever her opinion was, and it was in a very ambiguous manner.
Okay. All right, I just want to stop you there because we're running out of time there for your comments. But we have listened, and we are asking our superintendent to look into that, and so we will take your information. You can give it to our board clerk, and we will have a report from our superintendent about the situation.
¿Podría hacerles llegar las copias a ustedes? Aquí las tengo. Una a cada uno. Traigo 5 copias.
Okay, she wants to give herself the copies to each of you.
Oh, sure, if you have them made, sure. Thank you. No, don't be sorry. It's fine. I just,
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, it's so good of you. Thank you. We appreciate it. Really do. That's all right. No, we'll have the clerk make a copy. Thank you. Thank you very much for your involvement. It's important. We want you to know that we do appreciate your involvement, so thank you.
Ellos que usted esté segura que agradecen su participación.
Michelle Krug.
Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias.
Good evening, Dr. Janney and esteemed Board of Trustees. I just want to share that I had an amazing opportunity yesterday to hear a presentation, to experience a presentation by, and I may be saying the name wrong, so please correct me, or the department wrong, but by Lauren Nicklin. And the Department of Equity, Restorative Justice, and Diversity, something like that. She was amazing. I may not have the department right, but man, like Maya Angelou says, you may not remember what they said, you may not remember what they did, but you'll always remember how they make you feel. She had it spot on. You really scored with having her in that position. I've been involved with diversity, equity issues for decades now, and I have never heard it more impactful. She gets it that you've got to start with the environment. She gets it that you've got to be able to share, you've got to be able to feel first, and then be able to share love on all levels, or you're not going to get anywhere. I just want to tell you that she was amazing. I'm jealous that she can't be like duplicated to every single of the 42 school districts in the county. I'm thrilled that we have her doing this work in this district. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alma Zendejas.
Good evening, board members. My name is Alma Sendejas, and I'm the Booster Club president for the East Lake Lady Lacrosse Titans. I'm here today because last year our parents, along with the Booster Club, organize fundraising for the club in order to compensate assistant coaches to help our head coach with the JV and varsity lacrosse for girls at Islay High School. We have been doing this for the last 3 years and assisting and compensating the assistant coaches. This year, while we did the whole fundraising through the whole season, when we were ready to fund the assistant coach, we were told that that was no longer allowed. And our assistant coaches this last season went home unpaid. We feel that obviously we do want to compensate those coaches because they did put in their time and their effort with the understanding that they were going to receive compensation, and they were not. So we're here requesting to see if something could be done to make us or allow us to pay these coaches. The club was able to fund all the funds that we need to compensate them. So we just need basically an approval to make sure that they can get compensated from the Booster Club. Now, it is our understanding that moving forward, we were advised that that can no longer happen, and we just want to present or better understand the reasons as to why it's not allowed. We were told by the athletics department chair at Islay High School that it creates inequality among other sports. And, you know, if every Booster Club or if every sport wants to create or a parents organize a organization that can fund and help support it, I don't understand why one club needs to be, why everybody has to be treated the same way. I do understand, though, that there might be other sports that they might not have the parent support. However, I do feel that we can work together to see if we can find a common ground to help everybody, not just perhaps one sport, but among the school, at each school or globally around the district. So I'm looking for ideas, and I'm looking also to see suggestions on how we can better assist our head coaches in multiple different athletics, not just girls lacrosse, though we're emphasizing our girls lacrosse because this is the parents that we obviously have our kids in. But we do want to create equality for every other sport, and we want to see if we can re-implement the booster class being able to pay or compensate assistant coaches. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Grills.
Hello to the board. Hello to Ms. Paglian. Sorry, Grills with a spell with a Y gets the same thing. Hello to people on the board that I haven't seen or people on staff that I haven't seen in a few years. I pride myself in having been very involved in the last two superintendents, and no longer being here, and the previous boards no longer being involved with being on the board. I have not been here in about 3 years, trying to give this board and the new staff a chance to get situated and moving forward. Unfortunately, I'm back, and hopefully we can make this work well. But I'm beginning to see a lot of the same trends falling into place, and I don't believe that it's coming from staff and the superintendent, but I am seeing a lot of the same trends. The trends that I'm seeing are the continued use of Melrose funds as a funding opportunity and a place of borrowing money to cover funds for other places. The continued use of Melrose funds as a checkbook for bankrolling things. The continued non-maintenance of our facilities. The continued misuse and misappropriation of development funds and Prop O monies. Things like this that are not well managed, the fiduciary responsibilities of the board or the staff. And I don't want to come back and have to be a fighter of this. I want to come back and try to help make things work. So, Moises, I'd love to be part of your staff looking at this, or part of the group looking at this. Okay? I did not get along with a lot of the people, both on staff and a lot of people on the board. They're people I still deal with in my community. I live out in Community District 11. So I'm paying Melrose. I also pay county taxes, which also go to running this district. sometimes I think you guys forget that don't live out there that I pay the same taxes that you guys pay along with my Mellorews. Deanne, I know you know who I am. Imelda, I know you know who I am. You know, Karen, I know you know who I am. Okay, because I've come down and looked at the reports, and the reports have never been really well done. Okay, so my background, I'm a mechanical engineer. I've launched billion-dollar assembly plants. I've kept hundreds of million-dollar airplanes flying. Okay, I don't have kids in the district anymore. My kids have graduated, but I still live here and I still care. Okay, and I'll get to speak to you a little bit later on M4.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
No further speakers.
Oh, that's my turn now, huh? Okay. Clerk of the board, will you please read the items being pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes, the following items have been pulled. F3 by Mrs. Hall and Mr. Tarantino. F6 by Mr. Tarantino and the public. G5 by Mr. Tarantino. K1 by Mr. Tarantino and Mr. Pike. K3 by Mr. Tarantino and staff. M2 by Mr. Tarantino. M4 by Mr. Tarantino and the public and staff. N1 by Mrs. Hall. N3 by the public. And N4 by the public.
Thank you. I'm going to ask some flexibility on the agenda, consent agenda, that we move F3 to the back of the agenda. So with that, do I have a motion to approve and do I have a second for the motion to approve the consent agenda? Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Solis, a second by Mr. Tarantino. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes?
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to start with item K3, and that would be for the report on the special district financing and administration on the analysis of the current status of funding obligation of community facilities districts numbers 1 through 6, number 8, number 9A, 9B, and number 10 through 20. And we have a speaker on that. Would you like to come forward? Ms. Michael?
Thank you, President Hall. I'd like to introduce Barbara Hale Carter, our special tax consultant, who will give the board the report.
Thank you.
I'm taller than
Welcome.
this. I have to move it up.
Welcome, Ms. Hale Carter. Nice to
Thank
see
you. Good evening, President Hall, board members, Superintendent Janey, staff. My name is Barbara Hale Carter. I'm a consultant to the district providing services as special tax administrator and community facilities district consultant. Tonight, I'm presenting an update to the status of funding of a CFD's obligation and an overview of setting the tax rates for fiscal year 18-19.
Excuse me, could you pull the microphone over to you a little bit? Sorry, thank you. That's better.
Want me to try? Is that better?
That's better.
I'm
Yes.
so sorry.
No, it's all right.
It's the height. As a reminder, the resolution will be presented to set the tax rates at the next board meeting on July 23rd. This is simply an overview of the funding obligation and just a reminder on how the tax rates are set or some of the key components of setting them. Please feel free to stop me at any time as I go through this. I don't want to get too far and have anyone be confused as I move along. And the steps that are done or the calculations that are made are the same as have been done for the last 2 years. And if anything has changed or the status is updated, I'll certainly point that out as we move along. Starting from the beginning, we wanted to remind the board that the annual administrative cycle is something that happens all year long. We're looking at the top left quadrant, establishing the tax rates of June through July. But as you can see, in each of the quarters, there are key things that are happening here at the district, paying debt service and doing state reporting. updating annual expenditure reports, again paying debt service and filing continuing disclosure reports, and then circling back to establishing the tax rates. This next slide highlights important facts or changes that have occurred in the last year. First, we want to point out that last fiscal year, 17-18, was the last year of the special tax levy for CFD number 2. Each of the properties within the CFD has paid for the full term of the special tax. At the July 23rd board meeting, a resolution will be presented and the first reading of an ordinance will be presented, which will end the CFD and request related actions be taken to remove the special tax lien from the properties. Secondly, new building permit activity. I want to point out that your CFDs, the term of the tax is June 30th. All of that information has not been analyzed. That's why we have an estimate here. We still have, with June 30th just happened, I still need to get building permit reports from the cities. But we have an estimated over 1,300 dwelling units through May of 2018. We've also collected prepayments from 2 apartment projects, several individual prepayments, and the district staff has begun negotiating with Home Fed regarding the next possible CFD, which would be CFD 21. This is an overview of the CFDs. It shows you the taxable units in 17-18, the projected units in 18-19, and the differences. This slide just lets you know where your district is growing. And it also shows the units that are falling off. That's the term we use when they've ended their life. They have paid for the term of their taxes. This slide is to point out that here at the district we have a choice when we form a CFD. And when you establish a CFD, you have the choice of either setting the tax at a flat rate or setting the initial rate at a lower rate and allowing for an annual adjustment to the tax rates. The table on the right hand shows that, for example, if I just use the 25-year term, that if I allow the taxes to be adjusted by 2% annually, the initial tax rate would be $24.10. An average tax rate for the life of the 25-year term would be a little over $3,000, as opposed to setting the tax rate on year 1 at almost close to $3,000 to start. Each of the CFDs has its own rate and method of apportionment. The term is called an RMA, and each of the CFDs within the district was established with an annual adjustment. This is an overview of the methodology we use to update the obligation of the CFDs and to determine the tax rate requirement. The first step is that we look at the new construction obligation. We look at the obligation set in seats. We look at how many seats were funded, either by debt or by a term that we've coined here as pay-go. Pay-go is cash out of the funds of each CFD, each held separately but out of their fund. The second evaluation is to what's termed capital projects that extend the useful life. That is a mouthful to say the word modernization. I will continue to use the word modernization, but that term is coined because it's how we tie what we do back to the mitigation agreements that we act under. And finally, we take the unfunded portion of both new construction and modernization, and we compare it to what is in the accounts today and show if there is any obligation remaining. Each of the next slides will simply and quickly pass through the methodology and an example. This first one is the methodology for setting the new construction obligation. It's based on the number of dwelling units in a CFD, and this year I chose CFD number 4. It shows the different types of homes in the CFD. I hope you can read it with a line there, but it has the detached, attached, and apartment home. And we multiply those homes by a student generation rate. This year, earlier this year, that student generation rate study was updated, so those numbers are updated for this year. Multiplying those, we come up with a projected number of students by housing type, and adding them together, we have the total seat obligation, or the new construction obligation, for CFD number 4 in seats. Here we're looking at an example of how that new seat obligation is funded. We've chosen Eastlake High School as an example. Eastlake High School was funded through the issuance of debt. A portion of the debt has been paid off, so we've paid the principal on only a portion of the debt outstanding. There's a small amount of debt still outstanding to pay off what's owed in bonds to fund Eastlake High School. Secondly, we show what's been funded through PAYGO. We come up with a total, and we show that the total percentage funded and unfunded, or paid and outstanding, in percentages and in seats. This is a snapshot of every CFD. It shows the projected middle and high school students. It shows the projected funded and seats in both middle school and high school, and it shows the unfunded seats at the middle school and high school level. Those unfunded seats are then turned into an unfunded seat obligation in dollars. I want to point out that these dollars take into account all actuals through 16-17. They take into account estimated actuals for 17-18, and they take into account the projected payments through 18-19. Here we look at the methodology of funding modernization. This shows that at the middle school and high school level, the math that we do, or the steps that we've taken to determine the cost to fund modernization for each of the school levels. This year, the estimate of cost was updated, but the methodology remains the same. We remove the non-reoccurring costs, such as the site. We don't have to buy the site again. And we have a net cost. We use the state-driven factor of 50% for modernization, divide by the design capacity, and we come up with a cost per student to fund modernization. Again, I use CFD number 4 for an example. We start with a projected generated students. We develop the amount of funds needed to fund modernization from the CFD. And finally, I could fit on this slide, some of them are pretty tight, the actual amount of funded capital projects that have taken place for CFD number 4, and show the remaining obligation for modernization. And again, it's noted at the bottom, this takes into account actual, estimated, and budgeted funding. This slide is just a summary of the modernization obligation by students, and by dollars, and by average. This slide provides the obligation, the funding that has occurred, again, through fiscal year 18-19, and the remaining obligation. And I should say budgeted expenditures through 18-19. My apology. This slide combines the obligations. I've taken the total cost of the unfunded new seat obligation, and I've added it to the unfunded modernization obligation to come up with an outstanding obligation as of June 30, 2019 for each of the CFDs. Before we look at what we need through special taxes, I need to look at the balances that we have on hand. The top line, ending fund balance, June 30, 2017, was brought to the board in December of 2017 by Roxana Travers, the Capital Projects Financing and Reporting Manager, and each December she brings you the detailed information on each CFD and the ending fund balance. This next section is still called projected through 6/30/2018. All of these numbers come from Roxana, and she will be bringing that finalized report to you again in December. The bottom section is the budgeted numbers for 18-19. And again, in December of 2019, she will bring you those actual figures. This slide takes the outstanding obligation, and I apologize for the different font sizes apparently. The outstanding obligation, it reduces it by the projected fund balance as of June 30, 2019, and shows you the CFDs and their remaining funding obligation. This is combined new construction obligation, modernization obligation, and it's been reduced by any fund balance. This is where I step into explaining or reminding us all about setting the tax rates. Taking the resolution to the board and having it adopted by the board is a requirement of the county. The deadline for application and resubmitting any rejected charges is August 10th, and therefore staff needs the resolution to be adopted on or before August 10th. The resolution has two purposes. It sets the maximum tax rate, and it sets the actual or applied tax rate. This may be a good point to stop and just to remind us all, and I apologize, that when a dwelling unit is first classified as developed, or when a CFD is first formed and the initial tax rate is set, on an annual basis, the maximum tax rate goes up by the greater of an index or 2%. Once the property is classified as developed, that amount is fixed, and it is only adjusted on an annual basis by a maximum of 2%. So that's how the maximum tax rate and the applied tax rate can be so different, depending on the year that the property develops. These are a few facts about setting the tax rates. It discusses the rate and method of apportionment, which is the method by which the CFDs are administered, and the method by which the tax rates are indexed or adjusted, and the method by which we, as the administrators, apply the taxes. It repeats what I just stated, that after the initial year of taxation, taxable properties within the CFD are subject to an adjustment. And it finishes explaining that at the time debt was issued, the district entered into a pledge agreement. It pledges the taxes of CFDs 1 through 15, although all of the CFDs pay for the debt. We've just pledged just 1 through 15. This is a history of the applied special tax rates from 87 to 2012. The maximum rates were always the applied rates. In 2013, for the fiscal year 13-14, the board did not escalate the tax rates. So the maximum tax rates went up, but the actual tax rates were levied at less than the maximum, or 98.04%. In the 2 years following, to be applied for 14-15 and 15-16, again, the board established the maximum taxes at the maximum rate, but they adopted the applied tax rates at the 98% rate. And I'm sorry this gets so confusing and the math isn't exact. In 2016, the Community Facilities District Master Plan project provided a financial statement for each CFD. This plan allowed a mechanism for the funding obligation of each CFD to be determined and allowed the analysis of setting the tax rates to be done on each CFD individually. So starting in August of 2016 for fiscal year 16-17, and last year, July of 17 for 17-18, the board established the maximum special tax rates for all CFDs like they had done in all prior years. But for the individual CFDs, we reviewed each of them and established the applied tax rate in a different method. This summarizes that method. For the CFDs that had fully funded their new construction obligation, no indexing was applied. We have a parenthesis in there, no escalation. This category was only applied to CFD number 2 for both those years. For CFDs that had not fully funded their new construction obligation, we separated them into 2 groups. One being CFDs that had more than 80% of their projected dwelling units issued. We applied a 2% escalation, meaning that their taxes were at 98% again. And for CFDs that had not issued over 80% of their dwelling units, they were relatively new CFDs, we went ahead and increased them to 100% of the maximum level. This chart overviews the percentage of development, the remaining term of the special tax when it's known, if the new construction obligation had been funded, and if the modernization obligation had been funded. As you can see, CFD number 2 remains the only CFD that has funded its new construction obligation, and as we mentioned, the CFD is now complete, and the CFD new construction obligation was funded approximately 2 years before finishing the CFD. It was perfect timing. Staff recommendations for fiscal year 18-19 special taxes remain the same as they were for the prior 2 years. The first category would be for CFDs that had fully funded their new construction obligation, that no indexing would be applied. And we have no CFDs this year that will fall into that category, but we want to keep the classifications the same. And secondly, for CFDs that have not fully funded their new construction obligation, we want to apply a 2% escalator to the current tax rates as follows. And this is a summary of the remaining CFDs listed out. I don't know if anyone has any questions tonight. If you don't have them tonight, you could always get those to Karen and we can follow up.
Thank you. Do we take public comment before the questions?
Yes, but there are no speakers to this item.
Okay. Do I have any questions from the board? Mr. Tarantino?
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. As always, a good presentation. Some of the questions that I'm always asked are, why do we need the 2% increase? And yes, you've put it on the screen, but can you put it in lay person's term? In terms of why is it that the 2% is needed? You spelled it out, but it's kind of in technical terms.
It's off.
Can you put it in layman's terms in terms of why the 2% is needed?
The district had a choice, and it had a choice long ago when CFD number 1 was formed, that we could have either established the initial tax rate at the lowest level we could, or we could have established the initial tax rate at a higher amount and let it be flat. And the district and the development community worked together to try to make the homes as affordable as possible. And so it was determined that it would be most beneficial to the homeowners to have the tax start at the lowest level that we could.
So it wasn't necessarily greed that motivated that decision.
The math is the same.
What I hear you saying is you're giving the homeowners a break at the front end to get into their home.
Yes.
How different is your formula for the projection of seats from the projection that our planning department comes up with?
It should be no different. I do not take into account decreases in seats in other parts of the district possibly, but I'm simply taking the dwelling units and multiplying it by student generation rate. I don't look at it, increases or decreases of attendance.
So you're basically looking at only the CFD areas and not necessarily the entire.
Yes.
There's a lot of criticism in terms of us pooling CFD money and using it throughout CFD. Can you think of an advantage of doing that? First of all, is it legal? Because I think there's some individuals in the community who feel that we're just
I can think of several. One, oh yes. One, I want to state I'm not legal counsel, and so the question about legality would need to come from them, but I know that they have reviewed it, and they would never have allowed you to issue debt if pooling the funds was not an allowable thing to do. My thoughts for pooling the funds economically is because you're going to get a better interest rate on the bonds, having a larger revenue source to back up the payment of those bonds. So there's a great interest rate savings to the district in the pooling method. And more practically, when you build something as large as a high school, even in a community such as CFD number 1, if we talked about Eastlake High School, when Eastlake High School was built, there weren't enough students in CFD number 1 to fund or fill a high school. We could not, or we, I feel like I'm part of you. Thank you. Could not have funded an entire high school, or even the portion of the high school that was first funded, without the support, I believe, of 1 through 4 at that time to start that high school. It impacted because of the reduction in revenue that was brought in for that year. To some degree, yes. They have paid their new construction obligation. They've paid all of the obligation that we mitigated with them to meet. And I don't believe there is an issue. It's because each home has its own term. So if I built my home in 1990, it's 25 years from 1990. If you receive, that's why CFD number 1 is so tricky. It still says unknown because I still have undeveloped property in CFD number 1. It's much less now that we formed CFD 19. We just have a handful of custom homes, I believe. Correct. And I want to be very clear that even if my home was built in 1990 and it started my 25-year clock or 30-year clock or 35-year clock or whatever the CFD is, that when my home has paid for that term, it ends for me or for my home. When we talk about and when we talk about CFD number 2 ending, it's because every home has now ended. Last year, I think only 2 properties were taxed.
Thank you. Mr. Tarantino, good question. Do I have questions from another board member? Mr. Seagrass?
It's more about understanding all this. If we didn't have the, excuse me, sorry, President.
That's all right, thank you.
So if we didn't have the CFD vehicle, how would things get paid when homes were like built? Does that make sense at all?
It does. Without a CFD, the district receives a payment at certificate of compliance for every home that's built based on a statutory fee. That's what the district is collecting today.
So maybe my question doesn't make sense.
Sorry.
No. So if there isn't a way, if the CFDs aren't there, and you need to build the schools and all that, I mean, would it then whoever was building the homes or buying those homes would have to pay everything up front? Is that how I understand that? Or
yes.
And this is the reason why there's CFDs to pay for the services that are needed for the schools, and that's all I'm concerned about. But this is what this vehicle is about.
Yes, it is. I think my point I was trying to.
It was over my head.
No, it is. I was just trying to state it's a much lesser amount.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just have one question.
Mr. Pike?
If I'm buying your house, Barbara, in 2000, 10 years later, after the 25 years, is mine only for 15 then?
Yes.
Okay.
It's on the dwelling unit.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you. I have some questions. So, if you don't mind. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It is a lot of information, and it is a lot to wrap your mind around. So, if you wanted to learn more about this on your, free time, if I was just, wanting to enhance my skills as a, citizen or as maybe for whatever reason, because I'm not all there. What would you suggest a person? How does a person that doesn't sit on a board learn about all this? Forget about it. You have to get a degree in finance or a master's, probably. Okay, it's way more complicated than what you could possibly answer. Moises, Dr. Aguirre, would you like to chime in on that?
In terms of that question, there are some resources available online. There's some white papers that have been developed as kind of guides for what I would characterize as kind of a basic understanding.
Just for
this is how it was established. And there's some white papers available online.
Okay, that's good to know.
And your financial advisor is here tonight.
Right.
And
well,
CDAC, California Debt Investment Advisory Commission, he was just letting me know that they have some information also. It's difficult because every CFD is run by the rate and method, and so you have to know that what you're reading, whether you're reading something globally, what the statute says, or whether you're reading something specific to that RNA, they can be different.
Is there some CFDs that have to, or it has to be determined by an election? Is there ever that case?
At formation, every CFD is
by a formal ballot?
Yeah, there is a ballot.
Yes, of the people that, and so if it's only owned by the bank or the property owner, who at the time of the formation may only be the bank, that would be the only voter on that ballot?
we have to go to the registrar of voters, and if there's 12 or less registered voters, it's a vote per acre.
Oh,
So when we come in front of you and we say we had one ballot and there was 298 votes, it's because there was 298 acres or 288 acres, or it's a vote per acre. But if there's over 12 registered voters, then it is a vote by registered voter.
I thought I had read something about that, but I wasn't sure how it fit in this, in our little world. But, so when really, you talked about the district making a determination that we would either charge up front or not. And I really feel like that's sort of really not our decision. It's more on the developers and the city that authorizes them to develop that area. Would you say that? Because we don't have a vote in that determination, do we?
You have the vote in the fact that you're allowing the CFD to be formed.
Oh, so we have, but that's after the fact, isn't it? I mean, the developer's already got the land and is going to build on it, and then we come in and say, okay, we'll do a CFD, or are we actually on the front end somehow? I mean, I know we did number 20, but I, for some reason, was thinking it was already being a go.
CFD 20 did have all of its discretionary approvals, and they came to the district and requested a CFD be formed.
Okay. So they already had the green light to develop that.
From the city, yes.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say. That it's really a determination by the city to either say we're not going to do Melrose or we're going to do Melrose development. Isn't that correct?
I think the city's authorizing the development of the dwelling units, but the developer still comes to us and asks for participation in a mitigation agreement and the formation of a community facilities district.
So what happens if we tell them no?
We get a fraction of the funds, and we don't have the facility funds available to build.
Because isn't it the developer's decision to either charge up front because their prices are encompassing the cost of those fees and then pay them on behalf of the homeowners or not?
Yes.
So they could make everybody's life easier by doing all that development with the fees included and charge it out
What's
in
difficult?
the cost of the home?
What's difficult is that the district lost their ability to mitigate with developers, and we are only allowed to collect a level 1 fee as of today. That is a fraction of what you actually need.
And how did we lose that?
The developers went to Sacramento and fought for this.
So, in other words, we, as public education entities, have really, by the legislation that was approved in Sacramento, have limited us to be able to raise the funds to build schools or keep them in repair or whatever.
Yes.
On a local level, determination.
Yes.
Thank you. So my first question was on example, the $3,000. So that was just like an example. That wasn't a real. So is that on page, I think it might be 16 or something, where you were showing a per unit obligation or something? I think one of them was $12,000. Is that like an average what somebody can expect to pay over the term of their? Is there an average?
I think the only average I showed was for modernization, and in the prior years I provided you with an average, and so I didn't want to take information out.
I won't make you do that. I'll go back and look at my other notes. I think that was probably all. The pooling and the greater interest rate, that makes total sense. So if we wanted to so we've already issued bonds against the future raising of funds through the tax, right? That's what the 1 through 15 pooling of funds, we went out and obligated those future taxes against
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Tarantino.
I thought of one more question.
I see.
Earlier this evening, we heard Mr. Doyle talk about the fact that we use CFD funds as an open checking account to pay for other departments.
She can answer that.
Is that something that you can address, or
That-
is that something that maybe staff can address?
I think it'd be best for staff.
Exactly. Ms. Michael, would you like to address that for us, please? Thank you.
Yes, of course. For cash flow purposes, the CFDs, there is borrowing that occur from the CFDs. There are other avenues that some districts have that they can issue a TRAN, they can borrow funds from the county treasury, but those options are only available if you have no other alternatives within your district and you don't have the funds in any other fund of your district. So that is what both the County Office of Education for their TRAN and also the County Treasury look at as the first step that the district needs to take. It is also much cheaper for the district to borrow between funds because issuing a TRAN, the interest rate would be much greater, I believe.
Thank you. I just want to remind the audience to be respectful and quiet when we have people talking. Thank you. Dr. Janney?
Could you also explain why that happens? You talk about cash flow, but why would a district need cash flow?
So probably one of the most glaring examples I can state is the fact that for our payroll, we're paying usually the third week of the month. And districts generally don't get their apportionments until the state sometimes doesn't give your apportionment until the very last day of the month. And so there's a gap between when we have to make our biggest payment, which is our payroll, and the apportionment that's issued by the state.
And so when we're borrowing money from the CFDs or the Melrose funds, that's for what, about a week, and then we pay it back? How does that happen? How does it work?
So it really depends on what the cash flow is at the time and the apportionments that are coming in. That is the attempt that is made. But certainly the largest pieces of the apportionments and property taxes come in December and April, and that is when the largest repayments are made.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to be clear, thank you, Mr. Tarantino and Dr. Janney. And Ms. Michael, those payments are repaid with interest, correct?
That is correct. We pay them with the same interest rate that's paid by the county treasury.
Correct. And to do any other type of, like you mentioned, trans and other obligations to cover cash flow is extremely costly, is it not?
So the interest rate in a TRAN would be greater than what we have to pay the other funds from the county treasury, the interest rate that's used for the county treasury, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Carter. We appreciate your presentation. All right, so now we will go to M4, and that will be the first read of our bond preview. Dr. Aguirre. Did I surprise you? Okay.
So first of all, I want to make sure I introduce our team. I'd like to, if we can go to the first slide, please. Oh. Let me see. Okay, so this is a first reading and presentation. There will not be action that is scheduled for this evening. As we get into the conversation, I wanted to highlight who's been part of a team that's been working on this. Again, working on a project like this is complicated and complex, and so we have a team that's been working on it. We have Janet Mueller from DWK as our bond counsel, Adam Bauer and Jason Chung from Film and Roll-Up as our financial advisors, Karen Michael and Roxana Travers from Finance and Fiscal Services in our district, Manny Rubio from Grants and Communications, Jennifer Carbuccia from Legal Services, Janelle Quirk from Planning and Construction, Dr. Tim McLarney from True North as our survey and polling consultant, Bonnie Moss and Laura Crotty from Clifford Moss, our strategic communication team, and then Diane Wilderson and myself from Facilities and Operations, and of course, Dr. Janney, our superintendent. So this item is being brought forward really as a focus, if you look at the headers, putting students first. So if you may recall, back to 2016, we briefly considered putting a bond on the ballot. However, given all the considerations and the changes that have been going on in the district, it was not the right time at that point in time. However, we wanted to make sure we continue to improve our processes, our procedures, as well as continuing to review our facilities to ensure we included stakeholder voice as we went forward. So as a result of this process, we focused on taking stock of where we were, where we are, and really where we need to go. A good part of this work was guided through feedback we received from entities such as the public, CBOC, as well as our performance audit. So we've taken a multi-layered approach to this work because, again, there's multiple areas to it. So we began a process to update our facilities master planning, and we've had multiple community presentations with stakeholders to further inform this process. It's really been a result of 2 years in the making. Most recently, over the course of the last 30 to 45 days, we went back out for one additional kind of touching of the community to make sure we were on track and on point. So as part of our progress, again, with something that we wanted to highlight is with the limited funding that we had, we prioritized items that were a necessity in our district. These were not flashy items. However, these ensured that every classroom across the district was focused on students first. And given the weather this week, I would like to highlight yet again the HVAC project that we did and how that was an iterative process. So we allocated funding after additional rounds of feedback. It was decided to do it across the district, and I think that reflects a positive decision-making process where, again, we take into account different feedback points, including some pretty contentious meetings that we were all kind of at. And, again, that allows us to focus on students first and learning environments. So it's important to acknowledge, I think, the difficulties of our district and our bond program have gone through. It's a reality. However, we also want to acknowledge the changes that we've made and the reforms we've implemented over time. Again, with different areas of focus, different approaches, but we've been having a continuous focus on continuous improvement. So it's with this belief that we bring forward this presentation as a first reading, again, no action this evening, towards improving the work that our strong team has already put together, because at the end of the day, as someone near us is likely to say, together we are stronger. And so this is only a first reading to get feedback from the public, from the board, before proceeding. It's part of our efforts to be transparent. So I'll ask Bonnie Moss to come on up and present additional information. We'll go through and have each presenter present, and then at the end we'll have question and answers, and we're here for questions as well as we go through it. So Bonnie?
Great, thank you. Good evening. It's great to be here, and it's been great to be part of your district's team looking at the issue of preparing for a potential school bond. Tonight, we are here. Laura Karate is my colleague from Clifford Moss, and I'm Bonnie Moss, principal of the firm. We have been strategic communications consultants to the district and to the team, and we're here tonight to simply set a context for others who will come up so you can see how all the pieces fit together to help prepare for a measure that fits the sweet spot and the intersection of interest between what you know you need and what voters in the community and stakeholders in the community will be more likely to support. And so tonight is a review of the ballot measure package, its key components, and to get feedback, questions from all of you so that if there's any more calibration or finalizing of the package, we can do that between now and the next time you're scheduled to discuss it. And so here we are. Your facilities improvement journey has not been something that's just started. You've heard tonight that it's been going on for many months, in fact, years. And so it is bringing you to a likely decision for this board to make a decision about calling for a school bond election on the November ballot. Our approach has been deliberate, and if you look up on the screen here, you'll see a timeline that shows the sequencing of just the most recent piece, but that doesn't include the outstanding facility master planning work that has been occurring in the district for some time. More recently, earlier this year, there has been an effort to understand, is it feasible to put a measure on the ballot? What would that look like? There's been public engagement. We're now in the process of preparing for a package for you. And at some point, we're hopeful that the board will consider calling for an election, and then the entire process shifts from a district-driven, district-funded assessment and planning process to a community-driven, community-funded, independent campaign process. And of course, if voters choose to support a measure, there will be what we call a post-election process. People tend to say, oh, great, we won, it's all done. And actually, it's not. It's just beginning another piece of the process. But it is a strategic endeavor. And so there are things we want to review with you. Part of the science is really understanding the data, that this is not something that anyone and everyone participates in. For a school bond measure, it is an exercise that registered voters participate in. And so you can see an example. We could spend a lot of time on this, but we won't, on your unique profile of voters. But as you can see, over 200,000 of them. And in November, we could see as many as 125,000 turnout. But of course, there are a lot of organics that could change the course of who shows up in the end. What we do want to point out, and this is a trend all over the state, more and more and more voters are voting by mail. And that means that we're not just talking about what happens on Election Day, we're talking about what happens basically through the entire month of October, as ballots are mailed during the first week of October. I'm going to turn to Laura to go through the next piece.
So you've been deliberate in this process and approach throughout this entire timeline, really along 3 tracks. So the first one is the district due diligence, constantly looking at the legal, financial, etc., board education, and constant updates to the board, as well as you being and focusing on this along the way and asking the right questions. And then, of course, stakeholder and opinion leader engagement, which we'll talk a little bit more in the next few slides.
And you will see a couple of our team members speaking to some of these tracks as we hand off tonight.
So as a deliberate part of this process, it was the multifaceted research and constant assessment of your facility needs, using that as part of your conversation with the larger community to understand where is the Venn diagram middle approach of what your facility needs are and what your community would support. So listening really was a huge part of this process. I want to commend you as the board and the staff of the district. This was a great process of stakeholder engagement. At all the school sites were engaged. The feedback was taken and adjusted. A lot of facilities master planning was going on. And of course, you also had the CBOC leadership briefings. You had a huge online engagement program as well, and you continue to, as well as summer and ongoing opinion leader engagement, listening, and attention to the other community members that might not be school stakeholders, but still have a voice in your community.
But listening has been a theme, and you will be hearing tonight about the latest polling and research. There's been 2 public opinion polls in this listening effort as well. So we're proud of the work that we've seen happening here in the district, and thank you for that leadership. Okay, back to the bond package. The way that we look at the bond package is really in these very deliberate sections. First, the financials. You'll be hearing from Adam Bauer on the specifics of the financials. Secondly, the project list. What is actually on that project list? What are we asking voters to approve in terms of if a bond passes, what will the district do? Thirdly, the ever important 75-word ballot question. That's the last thing people read before they vote, and for some, it's the only thing they read before they vote. So that is a very important statement. There have been developments in 2018 with new state law that candidly uses up some of the words in that 75-word requirement. So every word, the order of words and phrases becomes very, very important in that process. and I'm sure all of us will have comments to that regard when we get to that section. And then, of course, the entire package is comprised in the resolution, which you'll be hearing from Janet Mueller on tonight. That is the package. It's all there in the resolution, but what we're doing here is to break out for you what matters within that. And then lastly, of course, community alignment. And we measure community alignment through the polling process, through the listening process. We just want to make sure that what you're putting on that project list is what we know we've got some evidence that voters in the community and stakeholders will support. Okay. Whoops, going the wrong way. Sorry about that. So the project list is something we will talk about. Janet, we'll have you cover that in the resolution section. Here is the latest version of the ballot question. You can see that there are very important words that come up here, and I'm going to ask Dr. Tim McClarney to touch on why we ask the questions the way we do. And then Adam Bauer, when we get to talking about the financials, there may be some adjustments here in the ballot question, but we wanted you to see where we're headed on the ballot question. And then lastly, as I said, Janet will talk about the resolution. One final thing that we'd like to touch on the communications front, we know that generally folks here are very aware of this, but it's important to say it, and that is if the board chooses to place a measure on the ballot, once the district takes that action or the board takes that action, the district must remember very carefully its role and that employees, paid employees of the district, may not use district resources to advocate up or down on the measure or spend district resources on district time. However, employees who are paid by the district can, on their own time, volunteer to be part of a campaign. So we like to make sure we all are very attentive to that piece as well. And then I think I will come back to, key dates. If you all are comfortable with what you're hearing tonight and you give feedback accordingly, the plan is to come back July 23rd for a final action item. Tonight is only for information purposes. The filing deadline for November is August 10th. So that's another date to keep in mind in case any further adjustments are needed. And if your measure is filed, you'll be on the ballot, and the campaign window will be essentially August 11th through November 6th. With that, I'm going to go back to ask Adam to come up next. Thank you very much.
Good evening, and I've presented to you the finances many times, and what I'd probably start with is Prop O, and one of the things we've talked about there are some limitations that you have with the $30 per 1,000 tax rate, and how if you continue to be as prudent as you are, you can only access certain amounts over the next few years. And to kind of illustrate that, the next two issuances would be about $17 million, and then the issuance after that would be $11 million, and then these would all be in 3-year increments. So over the next 9 years, we're talking about somewhere around $45 million. And with that, you'd get to your last series of bonds by 2047. So not really meeting the facility needs that you have, and by the time you'd be able to access a lot of that, you'd be experiencing a lot of inflation. And so that was really what, in 2016, when we were looking at this GeoBond measure, is how to generate more funds for these projects. One of the things is, why does Prop O not satisfy all your needs today? And one of the big factors there was your GeoBond passed in 2008. Between 2010 and 2014, you had substantial declines in assessed value. So a lot of these bond measures assume a certain level of growth. And for a lot of decades, that worked out very well. But for the 2000 decade, that did not work out so well. And so you actually saw declines instead of increases. And so that's one reason why you're at your maximum tax rate with some limited capacity in the future, is because of those drops in assessed value. Now, your situation is much better than a lot of other districts. A lot of other districts had projected growth and sold a lot more bonds than you did in comparison, and actually have a tax rate much higher than what they promised voters. So your situation's good. It has some limitations to it. You've been able to honor what you've promised voters, but you still, in order to build facilities, need access to more GeoBond measures. And to illustrate how dramatic those declines in assessed value impact a district, if you look at your 10-year average assessed value growth, you're at 1.38, and that's from those 4 years that had those declines. If you look at your 25-year average, you're at 5.96. So you can see just a dramatic difference between that period that captures those years and pretty much, I won't say the history of the district, but a pretty long history of the district. And so with that, what can you generate by looking at a different or new GeoBond measure, which is layered on top of the existing one that you have? And we've looked at the $30 per $1,000 scenario quite a bit, with a 4% assessed value growth, which when we look at your 25-year average looks very good. If we looked at your 10-year average, you say, well, not so good. But that's why we sell bonds in phases, just like you've been doing, where you don't sell them all at once. So you have this ability to recalibrate every few years should the assessed value not materialize. So if you were to project 4% assessed value growth and then you had a decline, you know that in a few years you're going to be able to come back and adjust that so you realign with what you promised your voters. So phasing your bonds is very important, and you've been doing a very good job on that in Prop O. And so with that 4% assessed value growth, we'd be looking at a GeoBond measure of about $454 million over the period of a 10-year period to issue all those bonds. But what we also looked at was what if we said that the district, we were looking at trying to satisfy some facility needs, and what if we looked at a bit higher assessed value growth to say we don't want to issue bonds projecting that assessed value growth, but what would our capacity be if the district achieved that? And so when we looked at about a 4.9% assessed value growth, that's how the district gets about $494 million in GeoBond measures. This also includes covering some interest, covering some cost of issuance. It's not all for projects. In this scenario, it would be about $490 million for projects, $490 for total authorization. But another thing we wanted to look at was if the voters, if we found the voters were not supportive of $30 per 1,000, what would $20 generate? So in some of the documents, you've seen 30, you've seen 20, and that's what this is we were going back and forth between 30s and 20s. So at $20 per 1,000 with a 4% AV growth factor, we'd have about $305 million in total bond authorization, about $302 available for projects. If we assume that 4.9% factor to a $20 tax rate, we'd be looking at about $340 million authorization with $337 million for projects. So you saw multiple rounds of numbers. That's where all those numbers come from. As this package gets to its final phases, those will all be chewed up and match each other. But one of the things that we were working on, or I won't say we, one of your individuals of your finance team was working very hard on today, was getting those survey results. With the 4th of July holiday and the timeline that he had, it was to the last minute to get all that done. With the data that you have available this evening, the team will be able to come back and really make some good recommendations on what numbers you should settle on. So that concludes the points that I had prepared for you. If you have any questions for me, I'm ready to answer those, or also turn it over to Dr. McCarney. Great, thank you. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. So did you prepare the figures for the slide? I think it's the one where it's talking about the assessed value, the cents per.
Yes.
So on one, there's a couple of different numbers, and that's what you're referring to about some changes along the line. You were kind of playing with different scenarios.
Yeah, as if it's not complicated enough when I say amount per 100,000. At other times we reference amounts per $100. So that 2 cents per $100 lines up with that $20 per 1,000,
okay.
And the 3 lines up with the 30. But that's exactly what I'm getting at. Is we were surveying different amounts.
All right.
We put the maximum numbers for authorization in here, but we had the lower amount in the tax rate. When you get to a final package, those two would match up. We really need the data this evening to give you good recommendations on
All
that.
right. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Janney. I'm Tim McClarney, and President of True North Research. Earlier this year, right at the beginning of this year, we had the opportunity to conduct a baseline survey of likely November 2018 voters for the district to get a gauge on voters' opinions about the feasibility of a bond measure, right? Would they be supportive of that? And if so, how might you go about structuring that measure in a way that's consistent with the type of measure your community is interested in supporting, what types of facilities, improvements do they see as priorities, et cetera. And at that baseline survey, we found voter support ranged between about 54% to 62%, depending on the context, meaning were they seeing this 75 words for the first time without any other context? After we talked in more detail about tax rates and projects, we circled back and took a read on support again, and then we also tested arguments pro and con to sort of simulate that election environment so they get a sense of, okay, this is the type of discussion and debate that will occur in the community. We shared that with them and then came back again and asked them about their support levels, and that's why you get this range of about 54 to 62%. Since that time, the district, as Bonnie had pointed out in her slides, has been very active in trying to reach out to the community and start to engage on this topic. You're going through a master planning process, which inherently has a lot of opportunities for you to share information with the community and for the community to share information with you. We've also had about 5 months or so of time, and so we wanted to circle back and do what we call a tracking survey. So a little closer to the time that this board would be at the point of considering placing a measure on the ballot, we have an up-to-date read on community support for the proposal. The other thing we were doing in this poll was testing a couple variations on the 75 words. You've heard in prior discussions that some of the AB 195 changed some of the requirements around 75-word ballot statements. Up until as recently as last week, it was still uncertain as to whether AB 195 would apply for November 2018 or not. They were talking about postponing at the state. And so we were paired and looking at because that 75-word ballot statement could be so instrumental in how voters react to your proposal, right? Because as Bonnie mentioned, for some voters, it's the only thing they're going to see before they vote. We were testing two variations to understand, depending on what happens with AB 195, where would we land. I think we did all of this in under 3 weeks, from the time of getting a questionnaire approved to standing here tonight. We just finished with data collection this weekend. We have not had a chance to fully analyze this data. We are just in what we call our preliminary top line stages, but I want to give you a quick update on what we're seeing based on that. More information is coming. By the way, we were, I think, contracted to do 500. We wound up doing 669 interviews, and so we overshot in terms of data collection, which is a good thing. It just improves the overall reliability of the data. Those were all what we call likely November 18 voters who we would expect to cast a ballot this November. And whereas in the baseline we saw support between 54 and 62%, the numbers were actually considerably higher in this tracking survey. We were seeing support levels from more mid-60s to mid-70s, interestingly enough, which is, you're one of the very few districts I've worked with that has sort of trended that way over the course of this election cycle. So that's good news, right? Positive findings, certainly. I would always put an asterisk next to these things because, number one, polls on a crystal ball, right? Looking ahead to election day and saying you're going to get 65% on election day, right? It's a snapshot in time. This is a good snapshot for us. It's certainly better than going the other direction, right? But you know, it is a reminder that at the end of the day, what happens on election day isn't what your poll says today. It's everything that happens from this point forward, right? And that's both in terms of a reminder to us that we want to make sure we're careful about how you structure that measure so it's consistent with the type of measure your voters have indicated that they're interested in supporting. It's also, I think, important to emphasize that there's still a lot of work to be done between now and Election Day, in particular going out and communicating with your voters about this proposal. This November is going to be a noisy election environment, and there are some other things on this ballot, right, and the general sort of partisan demeanor of what's happening at the national level, which I suspect is going to set a somewhat anti-tax tone to this November election, right? More so than some of the others. And so my point in pointing that out is because it's going to be important that we want to sort of separate this proposal, right, from sort of the general tone, right, of what's going on, separate yourselves. And, you know, to do that, you really have to do an excellent job reaching out to voters so they understand the decision you're asking them to make and how important it is to this community, right? That's a quick update. Again, I don't have slides because we just got out of the field and got the data this morning, but encouraging news, and so I want to share that with you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. And I think next up is Janet.
All right, good evening. Good evening. So what you have in terms of documentation to look at tonight is this sort of compilation, I would say, of all the efforts of the various team members. And we know it's not perfect yet, and that between now and July 23rd we'll be making some refinements, but I did want to just orient you to what a ballot measure resolution looks like and what the components of it are. And then I think it'll be a chance for you to ask questions of any of these, any of your team members or anything that you're pondering right now. So the vehicle for calling a ballot measure is a resolution, and the resolution itself is, 3-4 pages long, and the purpose of it is essentially to lay out for, there we go, was that it? Oh yeah. Oh, I changed the format a little bit. The purpose of it is really to lay out sort of where you've been, why you're doing this, and then to basically give direction to the registrar of voters as to a variety of technical issues that you want them or need them to address. And so there aren't a lot of high points in there other than sort of laying the groundwork for why you're calling the measure. And then perhaps Section 4, where you certify that you are going to address and incorporate certain kinds of accountability features that are required in what we call a Prop 39 election, a 55% election. And those are items you're already familiar with because you already have such a measure in place, things like having a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee that will provide oversight, preparing and providing financial and performance audits and things of that nature. So there's some of those sort of recitations in the document. But I think where everyone likes to focus is really in the exhibits to the resolution. Even though this does comprise your full package, that's where some of the key moving language is. We've already touched a bit on the ballot label, which is the 75-word measure summary. What you were provided with your agenda copy were two options. As Dr. McClarney mentioned, I think it was late Thursday afternoon where we knew for sure that the legislation that was pending that would have made option 2 an option was actually dead for this legislative session. So AB 195 that we've been calling it is functionally going to be the law of the land for a November measure, probably will be going forward until the next governor is here and decides whether he or she wants to do something about that. So functionally, we'll be working within the framework of option 1, although as several people mentioned, we're still tinkering with some of those financial variables to make sure that it all matches up with tax rates and bond authorization amounts, which we had still been discussing as recently as last week. And then Exhibit B is what I would call the full ballot proposition. This will be in the voter pamphlet. This is the place that contains everything that you want to tell voters and live by and the promises about this ballot measure. And so there are a variety of sections to it. Section 1 are some key findings, lays out that foundation again as to what some of your needs and are. Section 2 recites to, again, some of the accountability measures that are required of you when you have a Prop 39 bond measure. And then Section 3 is where we've probably spent the bulk of our time as a team trying to develop is what we call the bond project list. So one of the requirements of a 55% election is that we tell voters through building a specific list of projects that will be constructed, and that is what we have attempted to do in Section 3. And what we've essentially done is created two categories of projects. Category A, which are projects that could be done at any site or building or facility that the district owns. And then Category B, which was our best attempt to go site by site and actually list the specific projects that were being planned for those particular sites. There is some overlap between the two, but Category A is particularly important to make sure that we have maintained some flexibility for changing circumstances over time. And we have expertise in the room to talk more specifically about, through the master planning process, sort of why we ended up with the specific projects that we did and where the priorities are for this particular measure. So you'll see it kind of goes on for quite some pages, 7 or 8 pages of the site-by-site project list. followed by some very general kinds of information that's important for voters to understand, that sometimes there's the building itself, but then there are a variety of other costs and expenses that go into a project that's built. For example, environmental review. It's kind of one of those facets of construction that sometimes isn't recognized necessarily by the public as being a critical function or part and parcel of construction programs. So we spend some time going through examples of those kinds of costs that will be also built into the bond project list, and also, frankly, to make it clear to the board that how and when and the order of projects at any given site will be a decision made by the board. So that, for example, how we've listed the projects isn't really an indication of priority or order, but that will be a sort of separate implementation exercise that the board would go through. And so there's detail around that as well. Exhibit B concludes with some very general kinds of specifications that have to do with bonds generally speaking. And then Exhibit C is also a mandated requirement for any bond measure. It's called the tax rate statement. Thank you for keeping up with me. I know I'm kind of racing through here. Is the final page, actually. Exhibit C, tax rate statement. We, in that tax rate statement, are required to tell voters certain calculations of costs and estimated tax rates and total costs and when the bond program is estimated to be fully paid. And so voters will find that detail in the tax rate statement, and that also gets printed in the ballot pamphlet that goes home to voters. And so Exhibit C brings an end to the sort of full package of what the bond measure needs to contain. And so with that, I think we can open it up to general questions about any of the information that you heard.
Thank you. First, we'll open it up to the public comment. Deanne?
Kathleen Shears.
Thank you.
I'd like to begin by thanking Dr. Aguirre for providing the attachments prior to the meeting. Page 6 of the handout, track 3, should read, promises that are kept. Page 7, aligned to the sweet pot. That statement, a little juvenile. This is on their presentation. When we're referring to nearly $500 million in taxes. In this community, bonds are as sensitive as the word colonoscopy. Page 8, CBOC leadership briefings. This is not a true representation. Case in point, BOC constantly being reminded that they have no power. A review of the past joint BOC board meeting reflects there is a need for the BOC to be recognized as highly respected leaders, that they are highly respected leaders of this community by all trustees, not just the majority of you. Page 9, project list. Have any of you gone back and researched the project list for BB&O? I'm sure it doesn't surprise you that I have it. I have the past 2 promise lists, and I'm going to use Granger as an example. So if you could all turn to your Granger page, please. I'm not even getting paid for this. It says, improve security. That was on the last list for Prop O. Number 7, upgrade, expand, replace infrastructure promised by. That was on the BBO list. Number 8, upgrade existing spaces, kitchen, promised by Prop O. Cafeteria, outdoor common areas. Number 9, locker rooms. This too was promised, if we only trusted enough to float BB. Well, that didn't happen, so you put it on Prop O. And guess what? Lo and behold, it's still not done, and here we are. You're asking us to believe you're going to do it this time. Number 10, track and field. You have nails, rebar, lumber, concretes buried on the field. You skimmed over the top and collected nails and some rebar, but what are the concrete and possible asbestos that is still there? That stuff, it got there when they built the Samahan Clinic. Did we dig down and get it out? No, we just skimmed over it, planted some seed. Go on out there, kids. Number 11, admin building. That was on the BB and O list. parking. You guessed it. That too was on the O list. What about the leaking irrigation that is breeding mosquitoes at Granger? What about the gas pipe that leaks on the side of a current building? Work that should be addressed with the deferred maintenance money that we are failing to address. Trustee Pike raised the deferred maintenance on or lack thereof early on. We received many promises, but now see these funds are being borrowed, yet you want another bond due to lack of upkeep. With all due respect to one of the presenters,
Thank you.
That was you, sir.
Your time's up.
I know, Ms. Hall. I'm going to be finished right now.
All right, thank you.
Past promises times 3 have not been honored. And I have a very long memory, and my family has a very long heritage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David Girls.
So, thank you again for letting me speak. Our esteemed hired help and our esteemed staff and board. I'll follow Kathleen with exactly what she said. I will step back and say we've got $175 million in Melrose money that is supposed to have taken care of things like issues at Eastlake High School, issues at Olympian High School, issues at other schools out in the Melrose districts that haven't been taken care of. There are things on that list that have a shelf life like athletic fields that will only last 10 years, that you're putting on a 30-year mortgage. We're paying money to have $165 million in the bank by having other bond issues that could be paid off, by having things that we're putting on deferred maintenance that should have been paid off on money that we're sitting on, that we're paying money to hold on to, that these people don't believe we're paying money to have. It costs us money to sit on that money. It costs me money to sit on that money, to borrow at 0.001% from ourselves versus borrowing it at 0.00125 from the county. To borrow, hold on to it for 35, 60 days, pay it back, and then borrow it again the day after. Yeah, that's what her reports say once a month. That's what they've said since Ms. Russo. Guys, read your reports. That's why you don't deserve to go for another bond issue right now. What's this world going to look like in 10 years? I don't know what it's going to look like after our new Supreme Court justice gets put in. Okay? We don't know what it's going to look like in 30 years. Look at the changes that have happened in the last 10. So we're going to mortgage almost $1 billion to get this $450 million to do stuff that we were supposed to have started 10, 15, 20 years ago that we haven't done yet. Let's pick a smaller amount. Let's pick what we need to do. Let's go for the right amount. Let's right-size this thing. Let's do what has to be done for our students that need it done now. Not try to build a $15 million pool down at Mar Vista that we don't even have an agreement to share with the city down there that was supposed to be done. Do we need it? No. We need a lot of other things. We've got a lot of students that don't have a place to go. We've been teaching them to go to college. We haven't been teaching them how to get jobs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nick Marinovich.
Good evening again. I have 8 items I want to go through. Went through this item, or actually 9 items, through this today for the first time. I'm speaking as an individual, though I think what I have to say represents the historical attitude or whatever of the Bond Oversight Committee. First item I noticed.
Excuse me. Are you speaking as an individual or as a representative of the Bond Oversight Committee? I just want to make sure I understand, because you just kind of made me confused right there.
Okay, let me clarify. I'm speaking as an individual who's taking the past discussions at the Bond Oversight Committee and trying to relay to you how I view, in effect, it's a gray area. Partly I'm as an individual, partly I'm speaking as the bond oversight chair. I don't think I can actually say. Let me back up. If I can take the time back, let me say I'm speaking as an individual since the Bond Oversight Committee has not met yet to specifically discuss this proposal.
Thank you, and I'll count that minute off your time.
Okay. It's a great question. It's something I struggle with quite a bit when I come up here. But, number one, I'll be totally honest with you. The $494 million request caused me pause. Not that the overall need isn't there, but that's a pretty big number. And I know earlier we had smaller numbers. So what I would ask, because this project list that's on there is supposed to equate with the dollar value borrowed. So the question is a $494 million equal that specific project list that you see before you? So if the amount gets smaller, in theory, that list should get smaller as well. That's the way the law works with the 55% vote. You're supposed to have a specific project list equating to the amount to be borrowed. The second issue I have is what's going to happen to the Bond Oversight Committee if this measure passes. Are you going to expand the current committee? Are you going to form a new one? Or how is that going to work? The way the language in the language in this measure leaves it open-ended. I think it would do a long way to foster our support, frankly, if we knew that the current Bond Oversight Committee, if this measure passed, would also become the Prop, whatever it is, X committee as well, combined to one. That's the way most districts do it. The third question I had, and Dr. Geary is going to get back with me on this on behalf of the committee, is the $494 million. How long is it going to take to spend that down? In other words, are you asking for a huge amount of money that in the near term you wouldn't be able to spend that anyway because you don't have enough assessed value to generate the debt to pay that off? So in other words, how is the phasing of that going to be over time? And the reason I point that out is if you add this bond measure with all the other bond measures, they total $1.3 billion. Now, we were able to do BB 187, but there's $644 million that was authorized but can't be fully funded because of assessed value in Prop O. So the question then is, are you asking for more than you can fund in the near term? Is this another sort of Prop O situation where you're asking for too much up front? Perhaps. Another issue is the competition from school districts. You got South Bay going to ask for an $18 million. It's Chula Vista, $150 million measure they intend to put on the November ballot. Accountability provisions, how you select a bond oversight committee, I think should be in there. You made the wise move. Another item on the agenda is you've selecting consultants for construction managers, architects already up front before the bond measure passed, which reduces the temptation for pay-to-play. That's a positive measure. I want to end on a positive note. I'm raising questions just because I know the committee is going to raise the questions. I'm going to raise them at the committee. I think we are moving towards a support position. But the dollar amount you're asking to borrow, I think, is going to be an issue.
Please wrap up. Your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle Krug.
Good evening again. I, someone who has spent a lot of time seeing the difference, like at Sweetwater High School and at San Ysidro High School, I really applaud you for putting the money in to get the myriad of necessities, the deferred maintenance that we have been putting off done. I understand that the money that you propose is always supposed to cover the things that you're putting down within the bond, but the reality is that there are things that come up, and my understanding about the bonds is that we're writing down the things that can be covered by it that we want to have done, but then we have to prioritize them as to what can get done at what time, in what ways. So I applaud you for putting in the training, for a lot of the details that you have covered thus far. And I understand this is just the first reading and it may potentially change. But I really appreciate the detailed effort that has gone into this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tom Lemon?
Well, that's a long way down. Appreciate the opportunity to speak and be in support of you guys going out for a bond. Bonds are something I think I know a little bit about. I've been involved in school bonds for over a decade. I have sat on independent oversight committees for over a decade. I know one thing for sure, and I can tell you, Mr. McMinovich and I maybe not agree on a lot of things, but I think we agree on some numbers tonight. You guys have roughly $1.4 billion worth of work on the bonds set already. You don't have $1.4 billion. I get that. You have $1.6 billion in deferred maintenance needs. Things that you're never going to get to because you don't have the money to get there. You need this money. You need this money badly. Nobody wants to pay for things. Everybody wants things for free. You need this money. You need to fix your schools. You need to make your schools safe. You need to upgrade your water systems. I mean, we're finding leaching pipes with lead. We need to make sure that our students are protected and safe. We need to make sure that projects that haven't been able to be done, that are deferred because it was a great idea, let's do it, but we got to go fix this first. We need that done. We need to make sure that the things that really are important to our community and the people that are actually going to pay for the bonds, and by the way, I represent a very, very large affordable housing corporation within your district that pays almost $300,000 a year in property taxes. We're happy that that money is going to be spent for the residents of our apartment community. We think this is a great idea. We're your partner, and we're going to be there with you guys. We're going to help you guys should you decide to move forward. We will be the ones that are on the streets talking to your neighbors, talking to our neighbors. We're going to be the ones that are communicating with our membership how important financing these bonds are. And that's what partners do. I love the way that your statement read. You talked about the things that matter to me personally the most, the opportunity for good jobs and careers. I'm that guy. I'm that Sweetwater High School graduate that didn't get to go to college, didn't have that opportunity. I entered the trades. When you guys go with these bonds, you create apprenticeship opportunities. I've said it a dozen times here at the dais. It makes a difference. It makes a difference in your community, and it makes a difference for those people in your community. And I highly recommend you guys move forward, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further speakers.
Dr. Aguirre, do you have anything more that you would like to address the board with? Any other information?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the fact I think whether somebody supports this or doesn't support it, at the end of the day, I think nobody can deny we have a huge need across the district. And I think that's important to remember and remind ourselves that if you're trying to improve the facilities for students, there's a lot of need out there. And I think that's, regardless of where somebody falls, that's a point of agreement.
Thank you very much. Now, for the Board of Trustees, do I have any questions or comments from the board? Anyone else? Mr. Solis?
With regards to all the lists that were created for the schools, there was input, of course, from the community and from all the stakeholders at the schools. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's something that we were keenly aware of. You were at one of the meetings, so if you would notice on the project list for Granger, that's something that was in there as some of the things that came up during that meeting as one example. But we did try to definitely keep that into account in terms of how those lists were put together. Was a combination of what we know from a facilities perspective and a maintenance perspective, as well as the feedback and the input that we received. So we try to do our best to combine efforts and make sure that it was reflected in this document.
Yeah, and from that meeting, got about 100, a little bit under 100 letters from students from Granger that want us to make sure that I have only gone through about a 12th of them. I haven't finished looking through all of them, but that they want to make sure that we don't forget about them. And as I stated earlier, Prop BB and Prop O said they were going to do these certain things. And I think with regards to looking back, I wasn't on the board back then, and I know now this board is completely different, and I know the staff is almost completely different. And I think we're looking at a perspective of the need, and I think I know it's hard to get it across to the public sometimes that we're going to do our darndest to make sure that what is put on here is going to get done. As long as we're here and we promise this to the people, I think that's one of those things that I know it's hard and it's a lot of money and it's not easy to convince folks, but I know from what I've seen at Granger, at Chula Middle, and it's and Chula High, it just a lot of this stuff is needed, and I know we need to do this. I know it seems like a lot of money, but I think we just got to get this done, and we have to make it transparent and make sure that the public is on board. And I'm glad with all the work that you've done and what you put out there. So thank you.
Mr. Pike, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to concur what you were saying, that we are being transparent. The money is going to where we want it and where it's needed, aka the air conditioning. And then I think once we start establishing priorities of what we're going to do, and it's going to be on the ballot what we're going to do, then we'll make sure that we can fund it and do it.
Mr. Segura?
I like to echo a lot of those same comments, and I think we've been super transparent and to where we're actually doing this now. And like you alluded to earlier, and I'll be upfront, and I wanted to do it 2 years ago, and I think it would have passed 2 years ago, quite honestly. But I understood that we needed to get things in order, with staff and training and oversight and auditing, and I think we've checked those boxes, and I appreciate all the hard work that's went into this, and it is a lot of money, but there's and when I go to the schools and talk to parents or parents that I meet from my kids' soccer team, they and I talk to them about when they find out I'm on the board, and they understand there's need there, whether they live on the east side or the west side. The schools are getting older over there. They're really old on this side, and I'm one of the schools like like all of us have, or some of the oldest ones, like Castle Park High needs a lot of work, and other than the Title IX stuff, there really hasn't been a whole lot done there, and that's they need some help, and that's just not a Castle Park thing. That's a number of our schools, I think it's important for us to move forward with this. And thank you for the whole team and the district for the last this has been 2-3 years worth of work coming to getting to this point. So that's what I'm in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tarantino?
Yeah, I went through the information, and I'm glad that the differences in costs were explained by Ballot. Because on one part it's the defense, and another part it's the defense, and I didn't know what was going on. I think in the Ballot statement, I think it's important to use what True North said in the first polling, that seemed refer to a board of trustees. And I think it's important that we're called what we are, and I'll defer to through the chair, Mr. Tito. What are we?
It is the Board of Trustees, and I revised it in the resolution. However, I didn't read all the Exhibit A and B. I guess I should have, but we are the Board of Trustees, and it should be consistent throughout. Ms. Mueller will be happy to change it.
Getting back to what Mr. talked about in terms of the actual project in the school, some of the things that I heard from schools in my district, Area 3, particularly at East Lake High School, there's concern about the landscaping in the front of the school. That's not something that I know that Exhibit A is kind of a general thing, but I also think that people are going to be looking at their specific schools in their area, and so I think we need to be true to what people bring up in those conversations. So that was the landscaping, and let's see, where was the other thing? Moving on. Landscaping in the front of the school, and shade area.
I think those are in there,
And I know that it's in other schools, but it's not in East Lake High School, and that was a concern that the parents brought up. I know that it's covered under A, but again, I think people are going to be looking, again, this is just specific. In my opinion, and I think that people who actually took the time to come to those meetings, and I went to all of them in my area except Olympia. And so this was brought up. And also the cafeteria services at East Lake High School. At East Lake Middle, cafeteria upgrade and also shade. Anyway, I think those are the main things that I noticed. I think it is time that we go forward with this. Our needs outstrip the amount of money that we have, and I know it's an election year, but oh well. At least we have the election.
If I may, I think
Dr.
that's a really that encapsulates the conversation. This is an opportunity to receive feedback directly from the electorate, and whether or not they feel this is something that's of value. It's putting out the question.
Well, they can also have a referendum on me. Really, not the bond. But I also forgot to say, what about, and I know again, in Exhibit A it references all sites, any and all sites, but what about Palomar and the alternative sites in the adult school? I think that some of these sites already feel disenfranchised. I know that we've made an effort to reach out and to include them in everything. And again, more about optics than anything else. So that's a suggestion.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all for your work and the collaboration. And I can tell you it has been 3.5 years, and actually longer for some of us, that were going to meetings well before the board was elected and well before Dr. Aguirre came on board and Dr. Janney. So I want to thank you that this is the community is, there's no question about the need. Across the district, there's needs. There is deep needs on the west side schools, but there's even a lot of schools that have been traditionally the schools, they have high needs too. So addressing them all either in Section A or Section B of this document is very good. And I think some of the specifics, if we get does it lock you out if you list all these different specifics for East Lake or for Otay Ranch or whatever? If it's already stated in the above, is that going to mean that you can't use CFD money to make those, to use CFD instead of the bond money? Because people are going to say, wait, you put it in your bond, so why are you using CFD? I'm just asking. That's something that I would keep in mind. I think what regardless of how specific those lists get, the key is that every need is addressed within this document. And it really comes down to board decisions from once it is passed. Board decisions drive what gets done. And I think it's important because this board, it weighs heavy on us, the needs at our schools, because not only have we been to those meetings and walked every campus and seen the need and heard it from the students and heard it from the parents, but sometimes I've heard that why are we having another meeting about this? When are we going to get something done? And what's really hard to hear is when people think that we haven't been working hard to do the right things and to put things in straight and to set things on the right path and to listen to people and to put systems into place that guarantee that things are utilized right, that things are transparent, and that we welcome the input and the oversight of a lot more than just a certain body that was appointed to to be a bond oversight committee or stewards of our district funding. So I want to say that we as a board take that very seriously. And what's hard is when people throw out the total amounts, like you've got this much money in Propo and this much money in, those are just amounts that we're authorized to sell, but that's not what we really have to deal with. So at no point are we going to all of a sudden come up with $490 million to start spending on schools. But when we keep saying things like that, people don't understand it. There's never going to be a point in time where we're always going to have this much money to do with, but we definitely have a need of 3 times that much. So I thank you for the hard work. I'm really looking forward to hearing more detail on the polling and to learn more about what our role can be as the leadership, other than ensuring and communicating with our public and our constituents and the students, especially the students and their families and the staff that have to live in those schools every day or in the central office that, and still produce wonderful opportunities for each student every day. So I'd like to see them do it in really pristine facilities. So I think this is really a good opportunity for that. Thank you.
Madam President, we have one more member of the public who would like to address this item.
All right.
Carolina Caldera.
Gracias por darme la oportunidad como representante de mi escuela, Chula Vista Middle.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak as representing Chula Vista Middle.
He estado escuchando, Presidenta, de que usted de alguna manera había mencionado de que tenía cierta falta de conocimiento en cuestión financiera y las estadísticas y información en cuanto a la manera como le estaban proyectando el PowerPoint.
I've been listening what you're saying, that you had lack of information or lack of knowledge to understand the financial presentation that we just had.
Considero en un momento dado de que no solamente es usted la confundida en esto, probablemente somos más de la mayoría de los que estamos aquí presentes en cuanto a la manera como se está manejando la información.
I believe it's not only you. I think the majority of the persons that we are present, we are confused in regards how they present the information.
sé la importancia que tienen como miembros de la mesa directiva del board y que de alguna manera es mucha la responsabilidad que ustedes tienen en cuanto a las decisiones tomadas sobre los fondos.
I understand that you have a great responsibility for the funding that you are handling.
Podría decirse de que desde mi punto de vista estoy de acuerdo con algunas personas de que es muy difícil autorizar cantidades tan grandes, excesivas en cuanto a las independientemente de las necesidades que tiene el distrito.
I agree with the rest of the persons that say that this is a great responsibility to approve this big amount besides or even though that we have greater needs in our schools.
Aún sin embargo, considero de que independientemente de lo que uno manifieste aquí, la última palabra ustedes la tienen. Pero independientemente de eso, considero que otras opciones sería para poder monitorear este presupuesto.
You are the one that have the final word in this, the final saying, but another way of supervising or monitor the spending of this funding.
Sería conveniente involucrar aquí más directamente, ¿por qué no? Los que están más interesados en todo esto y son el objetivo fundamental de todos nosotros, los estudiantes. Teniendo aquí a nuestra representante de estudiantes, a la señorita Pagelina.
Okay, why not get the students involved? Because they are the ones that will be affected directly, especially since we have a representative of the students in here.
Pudiera formar comités de estudiantes para que escuela por escuela pudieran tener contacto y poder supervisar las necesidades y los cambios que efectivamente se están haciendo con el presupuesto que se vaya a destinar.
Okay, how about just forming committees with students for every school, forming a committee of students in each school to hear their opinion?
Independientemente del comité basado aquí dentro de los miembros que puedan utilizarse la información interna dentro de ustedes.
This is besides the information that you have here internally.
También quisiera hacer referencia de que he tenido la oportunidad de en algunas ocasiones haber asistido a la Universidad de San Diego.
I have been in San Diego State University.
Y tuve la oportunidad de hablar con jóvenes líderes de diferentes escuelas que estarían muy dispuestos a querer colaborar con ustedes, probablemente hasta haciendo el servicio comunitario, de alguna manera estar asesorando en materia de finanzas.
Probably some of the students from San Diego State would like to collaborate with us and give us their opinion.
Las opiniones variantes de varias, tanto de la comunidad como miembros del board, y tanto de la iniciativa privada, quienes van a intervenir en las modificaciones de las estructuras de las escuelas.
And I think with a lot of communities and people from the private sector,
estarían, obviamente, el existir mayores ideas, hay mejores resultados.
The more ideas we have, the best results we will have.
No es sano para nadie el que solamente un pequeño comité se haga tenga énfasis nada más en estar verificando tantos millones y millones de dólares y de los cuales ustedes son los únicos que se van a ver responsabilizados de todas las acciones o respuestas que se haya, y no es justo de que los puedan culpar de algo de lo cual no se ha hecho correctamente y ustedes no tienen responsabilidad, entre comillas.
Okay, she said that it is not fair and it's not good that only a small committee will take decisions on this one, because all the responsibility is going to fall on you guys, the ones that make the decision of going forward.
Por último, me gustaría hacer hincapié de que cuando se presentaron a informarnos sobre el plan en la Chula Vista High, que es una de las escuelas más necesitadas, y también la Chula Vista Middle, hice referencia, precisamente una mamá y varias estuvieron haciendo referencia sobre la supervisión de los bebederos.
And one of the greatest needs are from Chula Vista Middle and Chula Vista High is the water fountains.
La presentadora nos indicó de que definitivamente esas revisiones ya se habían especificado, pero cuando va a haber reconstrucción, obviamente corren el peligro los jóvenes de que haya contaminantes en cuanto a remoción de escombros.
she's very concerned that if they're going to be remodeling those schools, when they remove the debris, they might contaminate the water fountains.
Thank you
Gracias, muy amables.
very much. Thank you. All right. So this does not require action today. This was a information presentation only, and we want to thank you all for your time and your ability to deliver information in such a clear way. We thank you very much. Can we take a break? We're going to take a 10-minute break now, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know, right?
Can Frank use the other mic? Because people are saying they can't. Nobody can. People that are watching online can't hear him.
Frank, you need to use the mic. They can't hear you online. We're now going to call the meeting back to order. We will now have item F6 pulled by the public and Mr. Tarantino.
Kathleen Cheers.
The gentleman who's going to be doing this training, I fully support this. Let me backtrack here, I'm sorry. I fully support this, and he is someone I have deep respect for. I don't know the man personally. I've just seen him at audit subcommittee meetings, and I have deep respect for him. Having said that, every year for the past 10 years when I look at the audits, what do we get zinged on? ASB. Every year. So there has to be, and I understand that, you get new ASB presidents, you get staff transferred, yada, yada, yada. But 10 years? And if you read the audit, because our scope of our audits are so, it's like icing on a cupcake, that's all it's like 3 pages of ASBs. So I would just hope that something is instituted, Dr. Janney, with regards to pedal to the metal, ASB staff. You need to follow the rules. Not that they're overpaid, they're probably underpaid, but, it's kind of sad that you see this year after year after year. And thank you very much.
No further speakers.
Mr. Tarantino.
Yeah, Madam President, just a point of clarification. In the backup material, it says that there's the cost is $1,100 per staff trained, but the total cost is $1,700. So I guess my question is that for one person, or is the staff a singular, or is it a plural? And if
Ms.
it's
Michael?
And if it's
Actually,
a plural,
I'm gonna get
how
that.
can the total cost be $1,700?
Because it's under my name.
Oh, I see. Okay. Dr. Janney?
Sure. So we got some clarification on that today, and that it's a little confusing, but the $1,100 per day for each staff member is each staff member of FICMAT. So it's $1,100 per staff member that comes to train. It's not the people they're training, it's the person coming to train. That's their consultant fee.
Okay.
And then up to $1,700 for their traveling expenses.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
Thank you.
It was confusing.
So how many people are coming?
1.
Okay. That's what I thought. All right. Does anyone else have questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve item F6, sorry.
So moved. I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Solis, a second by Mr. Pike. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item G5, which is the addendum for terms and conditions for facilities and grade levels for Hawking Steam, and that was pulled by nobody. By Mr. Tarantino. Sorry. What's wrong lines?
I've been called worse than okay, so another point of clarification, Madam President. So it says that in the wording of the backup material, it says that if an alternate property is not found in the 2018-2019 school year, then the Hawking School will revert back to a TK6. And it says for the remainder of the term. My question is, what happens if they find an alternate property, say, in 1920? Then would that still hold, or would they be able to have TK7? And I'm getting looks by Ms. Carbuccia, so maybe I asked.
Well, let me ask who's going to respond to that question. Dr. Carberry or Dr.
I'll respond. We were deciding who.
All right,
who
Ms.
was.
Carbuccia.
We like to check each other's understanding before we respond. So in this case, The agreement is explicitly stated that they would stay K through 6 during the term, and not TK, but K through 6, during the term of the remainder of their petition. However, like anything, they could ask, and we could talk about negotiating. But at the moment, what the commitment is if they're unable to find space this year, they will stay for the remainder of their term through 2022.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Did you have any more questions, Mr. Tarantino? No. Okay.
Thank you, though.
Thank you. I just want to make sure, because when you say their term, do you mean
So the term of their petition concludes in June of 2022.
Right.
So they have to bring a new petition back to us
Right.
9 months before that.
Exactly. So they have to be off the campus by the end of this fiscal year or revert. Is that the way it's read?
That is correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that I understood it properly. Thank you. All right. Do I have any? If I have no other questions, I'll ask for a vote.
Move to approve addendum.
I mean, yeah, a motion. Yeah.
I'll
Motion
second.
by Mr. Solis, a second by Pike. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
No.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 4 yes, 1 no.
All right. So now we have K1, and that is approve the report on consultant agreements. Do we have any public speakers on this item?
No speakers.
All right. I have two people that pulled it. Mr. Pike, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I just had a question. How is the teen court going? I see that it's been established, and I was just curious, how is that doing? Is it working well? Are the kids getting fair treatment, would you say, or from their peers?
Dr. Fulcher?
Thanks, Brett.
That one doesn't work.
That one doesn't work.
Use that one. Or
Scoot
talk
over.
loud.
Certainly appreciate your question about teen court. It's been in operation now for close to 5 months. And when I say operation, I mean the students have been trained at 3 schools, Hilltop High, rather, Chula Vista, and Olympian. There are plans to expand. As a matter of fact, we are looking at expansion to Palomar. There's Palomar, Sweetwater, Southwest High, and one other high school that's yet to be determined. Some of the people in this room have had a chance to witness and visit teen court. Dr. Janney's been there a few times. Manny came and did a story on those supports and services. It's an amazing opportunity for our young men and women across the district. They have been completely restorative and absolutely fair, and meting out what we would call consequences for the students. They also have a chance and an opportunity to question the young man or woman's parents. And many times the edict or the consequence has to do with the parents and the child meeting together on a regular basis, or maybe that student meeting with kids who are students who are involved in teen court and having opportunities to talk, develop relationships, discuss things that seem to be troubling them. So in my opinion, and I think it would be the opinion of the students who are participating, it's going absolutely well, and it's a phenomenal experience. And I know I invited the Board of Trustees to visit. We hear cases twice a month. It is a diversion program, so those students who have committed an offense, their first offense, are given an opportunity to come to teen court. Decisions made is contractually binding. We have retired judges and lawyers here who are hearing the case. And it's just one of the more phenomenal experiences I think you can witness and see. So, again, we'll get those dates out to you, and when you can stop by and visit, I think the kids would certainly appreciate it. And one more thing, we have also site teen court at 3 schools as well. So we have the district-wide teen court, and then we have site-based teen court where they're implementing restorative justice principles and disciplinary kinds of measures at those schools and sites.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll look forward to finding out when the next date is. I want to check it out. Thank you.
Thank you. So, are there any, Mr. Tarantino, you pulled that item as well. I knew there were 2.
Yes. on the Kagan professional development, in the justification it says staff is currently on phase 2 of the training and is not adequately trained to teach new strategies. And my question is on that one, how many phases are there to the program before they are considered to be trained, adequately trained?
Dr. Carberry?
Thank you. So they've been working with Kagan now since 2013. So they did, phase 1 was to train teachers and staff from the beginning of the year. And like most cases, new staff members come in, some have asked to be retrained, so they're going through that phase. This phase that they're doing now, they are going to be sending, part of this is that 6 teachers are going to be trained as trainers of trainers. And the goal is then by the 1920 school year, they'll be able to do the training in-house. They have to be certified first.
So this is a new cohort is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, give me
it's
one
not
second.
the same people who are getting a phase 2 of the same training.
No,
Okay.
there. I think there's 9 new teachers at the school, and then there are some transfers teachers in because of change, overstaffed at some schools coming in, and so they're using those folks, and then the rest of the folks are going through the trainer of trainers training.
And then on the parent-teacher home visit project, I guess I have a concern about teachers conducting home visits. And I guess first I'd like to know why are the home visits being conducted? Are there any safety precautions for these teachers who are going on the home visits? And what exactly is the purpose? Is it academic? Is it discipline? Is it student welfare? All of the above? And mostly it's a safety concern.
Dr. Carberry?
Thank you. So this program, the program that's up here, the teacher home visits, actually started in Sacramento City Schools between the school district and the teachers union. And it started back in 1998. It's continued to grow, and now they have programs that exist from Alaska all the way to Florida. So it's a very well-established program. They have 5 program attributes that they require, and part of it is the beginning of the teaching. As you know, Montgomery Middle went through the strengths-based work before. They've invited parents in, and they believe the next step is to actually go out. So one of the tenets of this program is that it's not going out because it's a discipline problem or other kinds of things. It really is to build relationships and rapport with families. And one of the tenets is that you have to go in teams. And so they have teams of 4 teachers together that they've worked through. There's a protocol that they do, and I pulled the information off the website, and if you would like, I'd be happy to put that together in a Friday update so that you could have some more information about it. It's been used in Grossmont and San Diego Unified as well over the last couple of years, and they're finding that by reaching out to the families in a way, one of the things they talk about in the program is that maybe it's not at the house, maybe it's at the park or a coffee shop or wherever else that parents are willing to meet with them. But it's pre-scheduled. The agenda for the topic is actually decided between the parents and the teacher.
So
Pretty cool.
There's advanced communication. It's not a cold call.
No, very
Okay.
much
And
a pre-planned,
And teachers are not going by themselves.
not going by
Okay.
themselves.
Thank you. That
You're
helps.
welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Carberry. Any other comments? No? That sounds like an excellent opportunity to build relationships,
Mhm.
which is what we covered in our State of the District
Yep.
this past summer, the prior year. So it's an excellent way also to build capacity for restoring a lot of things and ensuring students work well in the classroom. So thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve item
So moved.
K1.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Solis, a second by Pike. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
M2, pulled by Mr. Tarantino. And if we have any public speakers on any of these items, just let me know.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I'm channeling Miss Adato right now, and I'm going to ask, don't we have this information in the map room or on file?
Dr. Aguirre?
I'll ask Ms. Quirk to address that question.
Good evening, thank you. So some of it we do in terms of the easements and the property and the boundaries. What we don't necessarily have is accurate information in terms of the surveying on site. There's been new buildings on most of these locations. We have current path of travel. The new survey that we're doing is a aerial 3D. It's very cool stuff. And so we're going to be able to footprint around our buildings or any work that we do. As soon as we're finished, that same team can come back and re-snapshot it and build it in. So we're creating a live document that we can use for all of our projects. It shows every level of path of travel that we would encounter to meet the new demands that we're experiencing with DSA. So, and it'll also help us with siting locations for new buildings, et cetera.
Thank you. That
Yep.
helps.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve item M2.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Pike, a second by Solis. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item N1, and I pulled that one. Dr. Aguirre, I believe this question might come your way. Can you tell me when the last time we went out for these agreements?
Yes, President Hall, I can. So last year, the purchasing department indicated last year was the most recent time that the RFP has gone out. As part of that RFP, since these are commodity purchases, we can extend it as long as up to 3 years. So we're currently, this would be the second year, and they're on an annual basis. So again, we went out as a district and through the purchasing department did an RFP last year, which I believe some questions did come up about the recapping of tires. And so this is year 2. Next year would be the final year we can do it under this process, and then we have to go out again for RFP. So this is year 2.
Let me ask you this. Did they build into that agreement a 10% increase per year?
That is the information that came my way.
Instead of building in a set price for the entirety of the agreement?
It's my understanding that there was an escalation that was built in, and that was what was factored in, given the costs that are involved in this particular process.
Thank you. All right. No further questions on this item. I'll call for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Segura, second by Solis. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
No.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 4 yes, 1 no.
N3 was pulled by the public.
Item N3 and N4 were both pulled by Mr. Marinovich. However, he appears to have left.
Okay.
So there were no other speakers on either one. Perhaps you'd like to take them together?
Oh, I'll just take them like we normally do, which is separate. Okay. So, N3, do I have a motion to approve? It's a request for qualifications for construction management services.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Pike, a second by Segura. Would you call for the vote, please?
That was Mr. Solis.
Oh, Mr. Solis, my bad. Thank you for that
So-
correction. Call for the vote.
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
And 4, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Solis, a second by Segura. Call for the vote, please.
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. And now we have F3, and that was pulled by Mr. Tarantino. Go ahead.
Yes, I know that each year after summer school, there's a debriefing process, and I was wondering, after that process is concluded, if we could have an update via Friday update on what was found and what's going to be different for the following year. That's all.
Okay, and then I pulled the item because I would like to ask if I have been informed by somebody in the adult ed program at National. It's in the citizenship classes. It takes them, I think they have to go for a whole year, and it's like several nights a week. And that can be stressful on their ability to attend because of how long it takes them for completing that course. And is there any way to look at condensing it or offering a condensed course time-wise? Maybe more hours and less days, or a shorter time frame. So if you could look into that and provide maybe an update to the board or a recommendation or an explanation of why it has to remain the way it is. And because apparently for some families, some parents, it's a hardship for them to be able to do that in the time frame that really allows them to complete it in a yeah. And the other thing was about computers for their class. Apparently some of the classrooms only have one computer, which is designated for the teachers, and there's some needs perhaps for students to be able to do hands-on work in the class, and a computer would facilitate that. And I didn't know if we had some computers as they get, maybe there's a way to partner with one of those institutes that offer a discounted or loaners, or we have some that are being maybe not up to date for other, as we recycle or cycle different hardware, perhaps there's something within our system that could be utilized for that, but maybe to take a look at those classes. And I know that there's a lot of classes already that are definitely computer use type classes, but apparently these are more of the type with the citizen, and this was a suggestion from a student, not from a teacher, so I just wanted to clarify that. And I can talk more to that person or set up a meeting so they can explain it a little better to try and facilitate that question. All right, those were a couple of the concerns I had from, I can't remember what else I was going to say. And the rest of them I'll just have to let Dr. Janney know because I can't find my notes and it escapes me. So with that, we'll go to board comment. Would you like to have a minute to give us an observation about your first meeting?
First meeting. All of it?
Whatever you want to share. This is a time when we have open comment from the board. Usually they report on what's happened to them in the past couple of weeks and maybe talk about other issues that have been brought to their attention during the time they've been out in their schools.
Okay. Well, the first part, I definitely tried to keep up as much as possible, but I'll definitely talk a little bit more about that separately. But you did say the computers. I had a question because, I mean, from what I know, I have a very different perspective from the student that you mentioned. We have computers at Eastlake High School, and I know many other schools that do, and a lot of the classes fail to use them. I know that I I had one this year and didn't use it once, and last year was the only year that I used it for one single class. So, I mean, I don't know if it's more probably a training with teachers to be able to actually utilize them, but I mean, that's just my input.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Good input.
Yeah. So, Mr. Tarantino, would you like to be the first?
Sure. I'd like to thank all of our association presidents for participating in the California Labor Management Institute workshop that took place on Monday and Tuesday, Tuesday and Wednesday, the 26th and 27th of June. And I think that I think Ms. Hall, you can amplify on this, but I think the more opportunities that we have to get together and talk about how we're going to meet the challenges that not only face public education, but also the challenges that meet us here in the district, I think the better off we'll all be. So I want to thank them all for taking the time to join us in that. And apparently, I want to thank probably Dr. Fulcher and Ms. Carbuccia for spreading the word that booster clubs can no longer pay for coaches' salaries. So thank you very much for doing that. And my heart goes out to Ms. Zendejas and the lacrosse team, but that's got to play by the rules. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Pike?
I had to leave the last meeting a little early because my newest granddaughter appeared, and she's 23 days old now, 6 pounds 5 ounces, and it was in 109-degree weather for 5 days, but it was worth it. She's very cute, Olive with a Y. But other than that, I had a chance to go out Friday and watch some 7-on-7 for all of our schools. They were playing at Southwestern, and they're really shaping up. It looks good. I can't wait to see when the season starts. It was 100 degrees on that practice field. It was brutal, but they're looking good. And then I snuck over and looked at Hilltop's football field, and it looks awesome. Thank you, Dr. Geary, and whatever staff members were participating, because it's really shaping up and looking nice. Even my wife liked it, so that was unusual. Anyways, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Segura?
Sure, I'll be brief as well, but I just want to thank the board. I think at times, certain board members can put in more time into the work that we're here all to do, and I know Mr. Tarantino, and for sure you do a lot of work, and Miss Paula, and well, you got another career, so I'm looking to you now. But no, I just appreciate the hours and the time that everybody puts in, whether it's for pre-board meetings or going out to the schools or just, I just really appreciate that. And it's a lot. I mean, and I'm really struggling right now to stay. I'm just so super busy with my job and other things that I volunteered for. But now like I've said before, I'm good at saying no, thank you. My plate is full. So I'm just so I could be able to focus on this and help, and I still do. I'm looking forward to getting some more things done in regards to the electricians unions outreach to schools, and I have some things in plan. I have some funding from our side actually to help with that. So I get some high quality outreach, just not handing out, a flyer. To me, that's not a high quality outreach. It's when they're talking directly with the students and in the classroom, the activity and doing things of that nature. So that's what I'm really pushing for and working hard for. But I just want to tell you, I appreciate everybody, all that time you put into this board. And thanks to all this admin and the teachers who worked over the summer. My son was in summer school, got 2 A's in English, so he really connected, did really well, and he missed one vacation to the mountains, but he learned his lesson. We'll go with that, because that's what my wife said. And he made the other one. So, but I want to thank everybody who worked over this summer. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Solis.
Thank you. Just wanted to say thank you to the staff for the hard work, and make sure you go on vacation before we start. Okay, so enjoy your vacations, and also to the public for coming out and keeping us on our toes and letting us know what happened and what continues to happen. And also want to thank all the students that wrote. I'm going to read all these and I'm going to pass them along to the board, and I really appreciate getting all these, because that's the only way we hear directly from the students what's happening in the classrooms and in the schools. So thank you for that. And with that, have a great week.
Thank you. I want to thank the staff also for the hard work and the dedication and the number of times you answer our needs to reset our password or get our computers online right, whether or not we have the right the work around the bond, everything. It's been very, all the groundwork that you've done. And I just wanted to say that I too attended the Labor Management Institute, and it was excellent. Again, the second time I've been there, and the relationship building is really valuable. A lot of lessons. I'm still trying to learn the one where you lock it down and listen. But I learned a lot, and the heart of the people in our district is really in the right place. So I thank Dr. Janney for her leadership, and I'm sure that we'll hear from the group, because they wanted to do a deeper study of what's happening at Sweetwater, because there is excellent things going on here for students, because the staff is doing that work. So I wanted to say that. And I also wanted to talk about, I went to the Chamber of Commerce, the Imperial Beach Chamber of Commerce. They have a networking breakfast once a month, and I get to go there occasionally, not every time because I do work full time. But I did go to share the news about our previous board action where we approved the design build for the pool, and also to share the good news about the success of Senator Huezo's action to put an addendum on the budget where the state is providing funding in the amount of $2 million for that pool project. It benefits numerous students across our district, not just the ones in that school. And the whole chamber, was really so amazed and supportive and appreciative of that. I just wanted to share that with my fellow board members and Dr. Janney and Dr. Gary and the rest of you, because it is really important to that community. But they support a lot of students across the southwestern area and up through National City and even over to Eastlake, because they have teams from Eastlake that come there to practice. So it's a pool for the district. And the other thing that happened was I was at, Ms. Krug had mentioned a training that's an advocacy group that had a presentation by Ms. McLennan yesterday on restorative practice, and really how you need to put the soil has to be where you can grow good things from. And that's what even teachers, the attention she talked about, how teachers need to be provided that ability to address those issues before they can go in the classroom and teach. And so I'm really appreciative that we're moving in that direction. We do care about the relationships, we care about the individual, and it is moving our district forward, and I'm really appreciative of that, and I want to thank you all for your hard work and example, because I know by the way we have always shown that that's what's important to us. So it's good. That's a good thing. And I wanted to also say that I'll be starting a team up for the Survivors of Suicide Loss Walk, which occurs in November, and I'll be getting the team together to walk for that. So if anybody is able and wanting to join up, you can ask me about that sometime. and come on board to walk. So with that, we are now adjourned.